The bell loudly carried its ringing over the surrounding area, announcing that the long-awaited wedding day had finally arrived, filling hearts with joy and excitement. The milord married a stunning girl, who on this magical day was dressed in an exquisite wedding dress, with a veil with a beautiful face and a bouquet of flowers in her hands. The lady, dressed in a dazzlingly beautiful wedding dress, stood at the altar with excitement in her heart, but the groom whom everyone was waiting for was nowhere to be seen. And with each passing minute, the anticipation turned into excruciating confusion. The lady felt awkward under the guests' intense gazes, full of sympathy and regret, as if everyone around her had already begun to pity her for the fact that her beloved had never shown up. Standing under the bright light, the girl felt a strong desire to disappear from the sight of those around her, to hide from their curious and condemning glances, which seemed to burn right through her. Once upon a time, there lived a marquis, and one day, a real miracle happened in his life. His daughter was born, who brought joy with her and illuminated his world with new colors of happiness. The baby grew up surrounded by parental love and care, reminding one of cotton candy with her gentle and soft appearance, so airy, light, and carefree that you wanted to protect her from the whole world. Because of her natural shyness, the little girl often hid behind tall columns as if trying to hide from the attention of others, watching everything that was happening from her small, safe shadow. Having difficulty communicating and afraid of letting herself down in front of others, the girl often preferred to spend time alone, immersing herself in her thoughts and hobbies, finding solace in solitude. Parents worried about their daughter sometimes crossed the line and ridiculed her for her character, not noticing that in this way, they only aggravated her internal suffering and contributed to a feeling of isolation. And so the long-awaited day of the ball arrived, which became not only a celebration, but also a significant debut for the little girl who stood frozen in amazement. The carriage, magnificently decorated, finally arrived at the palace, since to appear in person would have been extremely difficult and inappropriate, violating all the norms of etiquette and nobility. However, upon arriving at the ball, the beautiful lady in the new dress froze with excitement, barely holding back large tears, when a terrible sight opened up before her. In the distance, among the glare of the glowing chandeliers, stood Avelina, a girl with long white hair whose beauty and grace captivated everyone who had the honor of seeing her. This beautiful girl was the main character of the novel The Black Rose, where she, with her hands folded in supplication, asked for help. Her expressive face and noble manners captivated everyone present. Finding herself in the world of this story on the pages of the novel, the little girl understood that she could not compare with her and felt unworthy enough against the backdrop of her impeccable charm. Holding the phone in her hands, the girl suddenly realized that she found herself in a completely different world, different from the one she was used to, and the surroundings began to seem mysterious and alien to her. In her past life, the baby was extremely sensitive and often cried even for the most minor reasons, such as when she met a bunny or for other little things. As she grew older, the lady became so responsive that she could not refuse anyone who approached her on the street. She always picked up brochures and advertising leaflets that fell from her hands. Hiding under the blanket, she tried to send messages, trying to maintain her anonymity and hide from prying eyes so that she could calmly concentrate on her correspondence. Clutching her now new face with her hands, the girl realized that she had become the heroine of a novel. Her heart began to beat faster from the realization that life had turned into the reality of a fictional world. Walking along the majestic corridor of the palace, the lady plunged into deep thought, trying to unravel the reasons that brought her to this world of romance. Stopping at the balcony to breathe in some fresh air and come to her senses a little, the lady suddenly realized that she had entered the body of a young aristocrat named Nadia Vine. According to the plot at the end of the story, this noblewoman was to be beheaded for her bad deeds, and the realization of this fact caused a strong shock. The lady finally came to her senses, tearing herself away from her gloomy thoughts and immersing herself in thoughts about the upcoming event, which now completely occupied her mind. The upcoming wedding. Turning around, the noblewoman noticed the tall and stately figure of a man dressed in an impeccably snow-white suit, which, as if it had come from a painting, radiated sophistication and elegance, attracting the attention of everyone present. The young man had light, almost white hair and deep violet eyes, which gave his young face a mysterious and charming look, as if he was from another era or world. Approaching the bride with a sincerely apologetic expression, the man politely informed her that the groom was running late, and unfortunately, the delay was due to unforeseen circumstances. Under the attentive gaze of the audience, the young man, visibly embarrassed, said that he had been forced to replace the groom. There was nervous tension in his voice, and his facial expression reflected uncertainty before such an important and unexpected step. Nadia had no choice but to agree, accepting the offer with a sense of inner turmoil and slight anxiety, as she had to submit to circumstances beyond her control. In this world, parents passed away too early, leaving their own daughter to face the challenges of adult life and cope with difficulties on her own. The girl herself was destined for a dark and tragic fate. The dear uncle was supposed to take the money, and in the end, as a result of complex and dangerous intrigues, the little girl was doomed to a horrific fate. She was planned to be beheaded. Standing before the altar, the priest, with a solemn and respectful expression on his face, read the vows to the newlyweds slowly and clearly, pronouncing each word so that these sacred promises would be remembered. The newlyweds bowed their heads and vowed fidelity to each other, promising to support and love each other through any trials and joys that their future lives would bring. The aristocrat had to sign the wedding contract first. An exquisite quill, prepared especially for this important moment, was brought to her and handed to her. Without thinking twice, Nadia resolutely picked up the pen and, understanding the importance of the moment, began to sign the document, realizing that every stroke determines her own future. The maiden realized with bewilderment that she would have to face ridicule and condemnation because of the groom's decision not to attend the ceremony, but to send his replacement, which was very rude. Something caught Vine's attention, and feeling an urgent need to find out what that something was, she quickly turned back to investigate the source of her curiosity. The large wooden doors were tightly locked, blocking the way, and giving the impression that there was something important or mysterious hidden behind them that should not be easily accessible. The signature was written with shaking hands, causing the letters to be crooked and uneven, reflecting the nervousness and uncertainty of the person who wrote it. The groom was the next to sign, confidently moving his hand and deftly handling the pen, as if every stroke had been carefully thought out and rehearsed. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a bright stream of light flowed from behind it, illuminating the room and filling it with a dazzling radiance that made everyone present freeze in surprise. Stunned, Nadia turned back sharply, clutching the bouquet of flowers tightly in her hands, her heart beating faster with excitement and surprise at the unexpected sight. There stood a tall, dark figure who apologized for his lateness. It was a man dressed in an elegant suit who, despite his imposing bearing, expressed sincere regret for the delay. He walked forward with confident steps, his every movement expressing determination, as if he was absolutely sure of his role, and that everything would be all right now. The people sitting on the benches, including the little girl, froze in fear of the terrible aura emanating from the groom. His presence enveloped everyone in a gloomy and oppressive atmosphere, causing anxiety and indescribable horror. Nadia covered her mouth with her hand in shock, trying to suppress her excitement, and eager to find out who this terrible man was, whose imposing presence caused her such great fear and anxiety. She felt a strange metallic smell, which resembled the smell of blood, penetrate her nose and cause an uneasy feeling of discomfort and horror. The man with dark hair and bright red eyes was completely covered in blood, giving him the eerie appearance of a demon, an appearance so sinister and terrifying that it caused a deep sense of unease in everyone present. There were many innocent victims in the novel, and among them was Nadia, whose fate also became part of a tragic story intertwined with the lives of other unfortunate characters. The lady, thanks to her pink hair, immediately recognized the heroine of the story, because it was this unique color that became her distinctive feature and attracted the attention of others, making her easily recognizable. Nadia was just a friend and assistant to the main villain of the novel, the Lady in Black, who was known for her cruelty and cunning. Leaning her hands on the balcony railing, the girl decided to leave the capital to avoid a terrible fate and find a way to change her life, escaping inevitable punishment and death. While the aristocrat was thinking about her escape plan, her name suddenly sounded behind her, and a voice filled with confidence and authority interrupted her deep thoughts, causing her to turn around with alarm. It was Melissa, a noble lady, with exquisite blonde hair, dressed in a dark dress that perfectly matched her refined image and emphasized her elegance. The woman, when asked why the debutante was alone on the balcony, received the answer that Vine was a little scared, and she preferred to be alone with herself to cope with her inner experiences. Folding her arms across her chest and sighing, Melissa calmly noted that if she were the girl, she would simply relax and enjoy the moment, forgetting about all her worries and thoughts. Nadia asked to be allowed to stand outside for a little while longer, enjoying the fresh air before returning to the hall, where her uncle was waiting for her to discuss an important topic. When Melissa left the balcony, the lady's face was distorted with disgust. She no longer saw the point in hiding her true feelings, and instantly dropped the mask of politeness. The carriage overturned, flying into pieces, and scarlet splashes gushed into the air, like blood weaving into the darkness of the night, creating an eerie and mesmerizing picture. The gears turned tirelessly, making a rhythmic knock, while the minutes flowed inexorably like sand through fingers, a reminder of the inevitable passage of time. 3 years had passed since Vine had first appeared at court, and now rumors of an upcoming wedding were spreading throughout the palace, causing a wave of speculation and anticipation. Sitting at the table, the lady answered her friend in a reserved and modest manner that everything was exactly like that. The long-awaited wedding ceremony, which had long been discussed by everyone around, was indeed to take place soon. Melissa folded her arms across her chest and replied with a slight smile on her lips that she had always thought that they would live together after the death of the young aristocrat's parents. Nadia listened to the harsh words addressed to her, her mouth slightly open in surprise. The little girl was considered only a poor girl, possessing only a beautiful appearance, suitable only for marriage. Thus a wedding with bells and an angelic ceremony turned out to be a better solution for the girl, compared to the horror of beheading that could have become her fate. The Marquis was quite happy to give his ward to the groom sitting at the table and rejoicing that he would finally be able to remove the heavy burden from his own shoulders. Holding her hand to her lips, the woman quietly whispered that the man in question looked something like a dirty dog. The words sounded like a sharp mockery hidden behind a mask of politeness. Melissa, spreading her arms out to the sides, exclaimed in bewilderment, not understanding who could agree to marry such a frightening man whose appearance only evoked fear and disgust. The aristocrat could only smile and listen to gossip about her future husband, who they said was boring and rude, coming from the eastern lands, and not causing much admiration among those around him. Disappointed by her relative's reaction, Melissa decided to add that the guy was also a freak and a moron, leaving no doubt in her negative opinion of the groom. Surprised, Nadia stopped and in bewilderment asked again what exactly she meant, not understanding where she got such harsh words about the stranger who was soon to arrive in the capital. Covering her mouth with her hand, the noblewoman grinned nastily, adding that the man was also disabled, and therefore Vine would probably soon become a widow, commenting on the bride's future with obvious mockery. This was sad news for the girl. Clasping her hands together in a gesture of despair, she tried with all her might to survive and maintain at least some hope for a better future. The groom's face was covered in blood, reflecting a look full of rage and hatred, as if his inner anger was breaking out in its most violent manifestation. Nadia stood frozen in fear, unable to utter a word as the boy walked towards her with a threatening step, his big eyes filled with horror foreshadowing imminent trouble. The noblewoman trembled all over, trying not to faint from the sight of the scarlet liquid, which caused her bouts of nausea and fear, reminding her of the recent tragedy with the death of relatives. She clutched the bouquet of pink and white flowers tighter in her hands, trying to find comfort in their tenderness and beauty, despite the growing sense of anxiety. The man himself was handsome, but as if in confusion, he tirelessly shook the dirt off his jacket, and although his efforts seemed sincere, it did not bring any results, since the stains did not disappear. The surprised blonde boy, who was supposed to be the groom's replacement, exclaimed, addressing the brunette, as his master, clearly stunned by the events that were taking place. The boys started talking to each other about current events and their situation. And at that moment, Nadia finally realized that this strange man, whom she still could not understand, was in fact a lord and her future husband. Finally, the handsome stranger's attention turned to the bride, and his gaze filled with interest and mystery met the woman's eyes, causing awe and a wave of emotions. The lord walked quickly towards the girl, his confident and decisive steps, leaving no doubt that he was full of determination and intentions. As the aristocrat raised his hand, Vine turned away in fear, her fragile heart beating faster with anxiety as she thought the man was going to hit her, and the fear of possible cruelty literally paralyzed the poor thing. However, instead of causing pain, the handsome man raised his hand to his face and froze in that position, leaving the bride in a state of confusion and relief, not understanding what exactly he was going to do. Watching her husband out of the corner of her eye, the lady realized that the ceremony was continuing, and her attention was once again riveted to the events unfolding before her. The lord, with a look of tension and determination in his eyes, seized his glove to remove it from his hand, and with all his might put his exquisite autograph on the contract, thus confirming his agreement and commitment to the terms. Looking at the guy, Nadia realized that Melissa was wrong. The groom really turned out to be quite stately and attractive, which could not help but make a positive impression. The aristocratic style of writing was refined and meticulous. Each letter was checked to perfection, as if each line was drawn with exceptional attention to detail. The lady froze in surprise when she realized that her chosen one was Altair himself. Aele, a man who possesses not only a mysterious aura, but also unrivaled majesty. This nobleman was an extremely fearsome and cruel man, known for cutting off the head of a minor heroine with his sword, in the original story demonstrating his ruthlessness and cruelty. The maiden's face instantly changed with fear and horror. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened in a silent scream, as she realized the unspeakable horror of what was happening. Altair, who held the sword in his hand over the years, was able to not only become an aristocrat, but also acquire a title and landholdings thanks to his outstanding skills and strategic ability. Vine's head was so immersed in thoughts of escaping the capital that she completely forgot about the main villain of the novel. The poor baron who, having become a crazy duke, turned out to be the cause of many disasters. The lady, immersed in the gloomy picture in her imagination, imagined herself as a tiny creature who found herself in the den of a sleeping tiger and felt a growing sense of anxiety. Nadia could hardly hold back the tears that were about to gush from her eyes, full of bitterness and helplessness, and only with the greatest efforts did she manage to keep them from flowing. Turning her head towards the man, she thought about how villains are not born, but become so during life, and therefore there is always a chance to change fate and prevent further evil. Altair, his red and angry eyes blazing, stared at his bride. His brows were deeply furrowed, and his lips were pressed into a hard line, reflecting rage and an incessant inner anger. Shaking with fear, the aristocrat felt lightning pierce her, as if an electric discharge was engulfing her body, and tender soul bringing horror and trembling to every corner of her being. In surprise, everyone present looked calm and unperturbed, despite the fact that the lord burst into the room covered in blood, with obvious signs of recent violence and shock. Suddenly, the people began to talk, in which Altair admitted that he had put an end to the lives of his enemies, thereby revealing the shocking truth about his actions and intentions. Pointing his finger at his current wife, the aristocrat ordered her to take care of herself, removing any hope of help, and demonstrating his complete disregard for women's needs and well-being. While treating Vine roughly, he ordered her to behave well, and not to be stupid, emphasizing that he would not at all like to resort to such a drastic step as beheading his own wife. Her vision began to blur, and the maiden began to gradually lose consciousness. Her world around her became foggy, and her thoughts and feelings quickly slipped away, plunging her into deep darkness and an abyss of incomprehensible despair. The lady, having fallen into the abyss of darkness and pretending to be dead, caused excitement and fear among the boys, who, seeing the motionless body, could not understand what was happening and plunged into panic confusion. Alsford Castle stood majestically in the quiet night of the eastern region of the Loops Empire, shrouded in the mystical light of the moon and immersed in a mysterious atmosphere of darkness. The groom urgently called the local doctor to the place where the bride was lying, and experiencing deep concern, asked what had happened and what the severity of the incident was. The man burst out laughing, saying that he had never met anyone who fainted from fatigue before. The laughter was full of surprise and even slight contempt for such an unusual condition. To this, the doctor awkwardly remarked that only the master possessed such strength, while the bride, on the contrary, was distinguished by fragility and weakness, and therefore it was necessary to observe and help her. On the lord's forehead bulged with rage at Vine. For her weakness, his face contorted with anger, and his eyes flared with uncontrollable irritation, as if her fragility were a personal insult to him. Fearing the aristocrat's wrath, the doctor hastily began to collect his things, quickly putting them back into the suitcase, with the only desire to leave as soon as possible to avoid the consequences of the nobleman's outburst of emotions. Altair was not alone. Next to him stood his loyal subordinate, a knight named Blank. Gathering his courage, he politely addressed his master, asking him to change his tone to a more gentle and merciful one, trying to smooth over the tense situation. The subordinate, feeling awkward, replied that his boss looked at his wife with such malice and unkindness that even the subordinate himself involuntarily experienced real fear. The lord asked again, confused what his old friend was talking about, because Altair, as it seemed to him, was making every effort to be extremely polite and tactful. The man noted with satisfaction that he had never allowed himself to be rude or behave inappropriately, trying to behave with dignity and restraint. With a wave of his hand, the blond boy gently hinted to the gentleman that he should show more kindness and avoid threatening behavior so as not to scare away the sweet girl who agreed to marry him. With his arms crossed and his brows furrowed thoughtfully, the aristocrat wondered how he could be even more magnanimous, since he had already prevented an assassination attempt by catching the killer sent to take the lady's life, and thus saved her, showing true nobility. The subordinate mused that the lord's enemies probably intended to harm his wife, so that the heirs of the ancient family would never be born, interrupting their noble line. In a serious tone, the guy reminded the gentleman that he shouldn't put off the question of heirs and advised him not to delay having children. That's why Altair got married. The aristocrat could not stand it and flared up at his old friend, who in his opinion considered him a real fool, not understanding the seriousness of the situation and the importance of the decisions. Clenching his fists and with a sincere smile on his face, the subordinate joyfully declared that he would support his master under any circumstances, ready to become a loyal ally and protector, despite all the difficulties that might arise along the way. Approaching the door, the guy with a slight smile announced that he was leaving, but would leave the couple alone so that they could enjoy their first wedding night, and ideally have heirs. Such impudence on the part of an old friend finally drove the man crazy. He rudely asked why he even dared to allow himself such behavior without showing a drop of respect. Before Altair could finish his thought, a sound was heard nearby that suddenly caught his attention and forced him to interrupt the conversation, forcing him to focus on the source of this strange noise. It was a sound coming from the direction of the sleeping lady, who seemed to be having something unusual going on in her sleep, arousing a lively curiosity and a desire to know what she was dreaming about. The subordinate's eyes lit up with joy when he saw that Altair had finally shown kindness and care to someone, breaking his usual restraint and demonstrating his humanity. As the nobleman strode towards him, the boy was frightened by his boss's aggressive attitude, feeling the tension in the air grow, and his heart beat faster with anxiety. The sun rose majestically over the horizon. Its bright rays softly penetrated the windows of the old mansion, filling the rooms with warm light and giving the picturesque space, overgrown with dense plants, a special atmosphere of magic and comfort. The stunned lady gently touched the mirror, carefully examining her reflection and feeling horror at her emaciated appearance, which seemed frightening and unusual to her. However, she soon turned her attention away from her thoughts about her appearance and turned her attention to her surroundings, admiring how surprisingly clean and tidy the room was, and how every detail gave it an atmosphere of calm. From her bed, the maiden wondered if it could all have been just an ordinary dream, starting from the very first day after the wedding, when her life seemed to change dramatically. Nadia sighed with a slight smile, realizing that the great hunger did not leave even now, as if it was constantly reminding of itself and demanding attention. With her hands firmly on her hips, the lady firmly decided that she would fight to the end, not giving in to despondency, and with each new test becoming only stronger. In the recent past, no one forced the beauty to leave. It was exclusively the woman's own decision, dictated by an internal desire for change and new opportunities. Nadia agreed to the marriage of her own free will, because no one forced her to make this decision. She sincerely felt that this step was an important milestone in her life, opening up new horizons. While stretching her arms in different directions, the girl reminded that one should not become disheartened and lose heart, even when it seems that everything is not going as one would like. It is important to maintain confidence and faith in oneself despite the difficulties. Tapping her red cheeks, the sparrow decided to start the morning with a fragrant breakfast. A cheerful mood and a light boost of energy were just what was needed for a bright start to the day. Her gaze was fixed on the door, and a hope flared up in her soul that someone would come for the young lady to accompany her to the meal. This house still seemed unfamiliar to her. At that moment, the maiden felt lonely, for there was not a single servant in the room. The silence reminded her of the emptiness around her, and she felt sad from the realization that she was left alone without company and support. She thought with horror of the old face of the master, who might well have refused to give orders to the maids to take care of his new wife. The thought filled her with anxiety and increased her feeling of helplessness. With a sad expression on her face, Nadia thought about how even in her new home, she was completely unwanted. The feeling of loneliness and abandonment deeply hurt her, making her doubt her choice and future. The sad blue eyes were looking into the distance, lost in thought, when suddenly another voice asked the girl with concern if everything was all right. The question was filled with sincere concern. The uncle asked the niece about this, having heard about the recent car accident. The man's voice sounded with concern and worry, and he wanted to make sure that she was okay after such a terrible event. The man, upset and comforting, told the little girl that her parents had died without waiting for help, and these words tore the fragile world apart, leaving only emptiness and misunderstanding. Nadia began to sob, unable to hold back her tears, sitting on her bed while bitter thoughts overwhelmed her, like dark clouds blocking out the light. Loneliness overwhelmed her. The uncle comfortingly placed his warm hand on his niece's palm, and with sincere warmth in his voice, promised her that he would soon become a marquise. The words sounded like hope for a better future. The woman asked curiously what exactly the man meant by telling such news. Nadia waited for details, as if she was looking for answers to her questions in his words. The aristocrat, tenderly holding the lady's hand with a soft smile on his face, explained to her that the laws of the empire were immutable and cruel, but it was they that determined the order and destinies of people. Thus, deprived of her beautiful dresses and former comforts, the beloved daughter gradually turned into a forgotten noblewoman whose once bright life faded under the weight of oblivion and dust. The servants, carrying plates of food in their hands, indifferently ignored their young former mistress, as if she no longer existed in their world and had lost all significance. Lying on the soft and cozy sofa, which seemed to be a symbol of luxury and comfort, Nadia felt a sudden and oppressive emptiness, as if the whole world had forgotten about her existence, and no one needed her anymore. Closing her eyes from fatigue, the girl thought about how wonderful it would be to take a short break now and have a snack of something tasty to restore her strength. Suddenly, there was a knock, and the lady, startled, on the spot came to life. The beauty, loudly with a friendly smile on her face, gave permission to enter, waiting for who would appear behind the door. However, the guest turned out to be so frightening that the lady's gentle face was distorted with horror and fear, as if a cold shadow had passed through the woman's heart, depriving her of all confidence. Altair entered the room, and in the daylight, he no longer seemed so terrible. His black hair fell softly over his shoulders, and his red eyes, although sparkling, looked more mysterious than frightening. The girl's mouth dropped open in surprise at the man who had entered the room, not expecting to see him in this place. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she was speechless, trying to comprehend what had happened. In his hand, the young gentleman held a tray with fresh bread and a plate of hot soup, from which delicious steam rose, filling the air with a cozy aroma. With a slight movement, the metal tray was placed on the table, along with the food, making a light ringing sound, as if inviting everyone to gather and enjoy the treat. The aristocrat himself turned away from his bride, crossing his arms over his chest, and a shadow of disappointment flashed in his gaze, as if he was dissatisfied with something that had happened between them. Unable to restrain herself, the aristocrat reached for the pastry and eagerly brought it to her mouth, enjoying the delicate taste and crispy crust, forgetting about her worries. She flinched when she heard the nobleman ask if they were going to eat standing up. Confusion flashed in her eyes, and the little girl wondered how to respond to this unexpected proposal. Not daring to contradict her husband, the aristocrat carefully sat down on the sofa to eat calmly and normally, trying to create an atmosphere of comfort and harmony around herself. The lord coldly ordered the lady to hurry up with the food before it got cold. The man's voice was emotionless and stern, like a cold wind penetrating the very soul, and this only aggravated the tension in the atmosphere at the table. After taking a few bites, the girl realized that the food was truly delicious, and she happily reached for a bowl of soup, enjoying its aroma and the warmth that warmed her soul. She lifted the wooden spoon to her mouth, blowing on it to cool it before enjoying the hot soup, which left her feeling full and satisfied. The girl shuddered under the strict gaze of her husband. Her delicate skin was covered with a slight chill, and she suddenly felt how the internal tension was growing. Awkwardly, all flustered, Nadia muttered that the food was delicious, hoping to soften the lord's anger. Her voice trembled with tension, and the beauty tried to look as sincere as possible to calm him down. As she continued to eat, the lady began to cry. Tears flowed involuntarily down her cheeks, mixing with the food. Her face expressed a mixture of hurt and stress, despite her attempts to maintain an outward appearance of calm. Finally, the plates were empty and carefully set aside, freeing up space on the table, and leaving behind only a light aroma of food and the feeling of a completed meal. There was still an oppressive silence and awkwardness hanging between the couple, like an invisible barrier preventing them from establishing a conversation and creating a more comfortable atmosphere. The girl made an attempt to ask if her husband wanted something from her, but immediately apologized for her stupid question, feeling how the aura of evil emanated from the guy in waves. The red eye looked at the aristocrat emotionlessly and threateningly, as if penetrating into the very depths of her soul and hanging over her with an invisible force, creating a feeling of danger and pressure. Kneeling before the Lord, Nadia asked for forgiveness for everything she had done and for her shortcomings that had not yet fully manifested themselves. Her body trembled with excitement, and she sincerely tried to express her repentance, hoping that this would help soften her husband. However, instead of making any complaints or reproaches, the boy quietly said that an exquisite dinner would be prepared that evening. The words sounded soft and encouraging. Surprised and a little embarrassed, the little girl asked in disbelief if this event was really organized specifically in her honor, because she could not even imagine that someone was capable of organizing such a wonderful holiday for her. Before leaving Altair, with a stern expression on his face, sternly ordered not to be late, his voice sounding as if the slightest violation of this order could have serious consequences. Nadia stood silently, looking after the man who was leaving. Her gaze was filled with quiet sadness, genuine longing and incomprehension, as if she could not understand why everything happened exactly this way. Unable to bear the weight of her feelings any longer, the girl suddenly lost her balance and fell to the floor with a loud thud, the sound echoing in the silence. Suddenly, the door behind her swung open, while the lady was deep in thought about whether she should prepare a knee brace so that the next time she fell, it wouldn't hurt so much. Nadia studied the door with caution, behind which the next guest might be hiding, and feelings of anticipation and uncertainty flared up in her heart, as if every moment could bring unexpected turns of fate. The stranger had large, snapping eyes that sparkled with lively interest, and the freckles on his cheeks gave his face an extraordinary charm and childish spontaneity. Looking surprised, the servant held the basin and turned her attention to the mistress, who, calmly sitting on the floor, also glanced at the maid, as if exchanging thoughts with her full of riddles and expectations. When asked what she was doing on the floor, the lady replied with a slight smile that she was checking the quality of the carpet, trying to justify herself. But her eyes revealed that the reason was deeper and more mysterious than just checking. Once on her feet, Nadia, with confident determination, suggested replacing the fabric with a more refined and soft one. to add the coziness and style that was so needed in this room, giving it an elegant look and comfort. The maid's eyes lit up at these words, because she had the same opinion on this matter, and the girl felt the desire to actively support the conversation, contributing her thoughts to the discussion. Looking at the lady, the maid enthusiastically stated that it would be wise to renovate the entire castle, as this would give it a new look and atmosphere that could inspire all its inhabitants. With her hands folded in front of her and a smile, Anna asked her hostess to take care of her, hoping that kindness and understanding could make this moment especially meaningful. It turned out that a trusted man named Paul had ordered her to come here and help the Lord's wife, emphasizing the importance of her role in this important matter and the significance of support in difficult circumstances. 30 minutes passed, and the maid continued to chat, telling about the details of the mansion, and the young lady captivating the listeners with her vivid and interesting stories full of details and lively emotions. Sitting on her bed, Nadia silently agreed that the house looked poor and homey, without decor, realizing how small changes could bring style. These were the only words from the unpleasant relative that turned out to be true, and the aristocrat could not ignore them, realizing that some of the remarks really did reflect the reality of her surroundings. Anna said happily that everything was going to change now with the lady's arrival, giving hope for new perspectives and the opportunity to bring fresh ideas into their lives. But the noblewoman didn't even think about the fact that she had to carry out the Baroness's orders, carried away by her thoughts about the changes and new opportunities that were opening up before her. Altair would not marry for the sake of profit, because he was not one of those people preferring first of all his own benefit and not fleeting charms. In the Vine family, the girl was taught many things through scrolls and books, which made her educated and intelligent, ready for the challenges that life could bring. And her past life experiences have taught her a lot, helping her understand what is truly important and giving her the opportunity to learn from her mistakes so she can move forward with greater wisdom and confidence. The castle looked truly depressing, as if no one lived there, with its abandoned corridors and dust that had settled on the antique furniture, creating an atmosphere of desolation and oblivion. In the original, Altair chose to devote himself entirely to his work and become a duke, realizing that only in this way could he achieve true respect and recognition in his society, leaving aside personal feelings and doubts. The wife of such a powerful man was shrouded in mystery, and her life remained a riddle to those around her, inspiring both fear and admiration, like a shadow hiding many secrets that no one dared to reveal. Clenching her hand into a fist, Nadia realized that a lot depended on her, and this realization gave her strength and confidence, forcing her to move forward despite all the obstacles. Deciding that she would no longer be afraid of her husband, the lady quietly opened the door and looked inside, feeling a surge of courage and a readiness to face any difficulties that might await her. There was no one there. Only dark corridors illuminated by the faint light coming from the windows created an atmosphere of mystery and a little anxiety, as if they were hiding many secrets. Nadia walked forward. She hoped to meet someone who could shed light on all her doubts and fears, and perhaps give her support in this dark and mysterious place. Reaching out to feel the wall, the lady tried not to get lost in this dark place, feeling her body shaking with anxiety and uncertainty. But the determination to move forward did not leave the girl. Suddenly, her palm touched something soft and dark, and the lady's heart sank for a moment, not knowing whether it was an invisible object or perhaps someone's shadow hiding in the darkness. Surprised, Nadia could not understand what exactly she had discovered hidden in the dark corridors. Her mind feverishly tried to unravel the mystery, but the enigmatic find continued to remain beyond her comprehension. Feeling someone's shoulder with both hands, the lady instinctively closed her eyes, trying to concentrate and understand what she had found in this frightening darkness, as if trying to sense the invisible facets of the mysterious figure. Suddenly, a cold voice came from the shadows, seeming to come from the very depths of darkness. It asked rudely what a young girl could be doing here, and the words echoed in the empty corridors. The lady recoiled instantly, recognizing the figure before her as the Lord, the master of this sinister place, and with each passing second, the tension in the air seemed more and more tangible. Altair cast an angry glance at the lady, clearly displeased that she had dared to grab the aristocrat by the clothes, as if a woman's touch had violated the boundaries of his world. The beauty's face was distorted with fear and horror, her eyes wide open and her breathing became intermittent, reflecting the internal panic in the face of imminent danger. Nadia began to slowly back away, trying to keep away from her angry husband. Her movements were careful, as if every wrong move could only make the situation worse. Suddenly, the lady tripped over something behind her and began to fall, losing her balance. And at that moment, time seemed to freeze, causing her heart to beat faster with fear. However, the fall was suddenly interrupted when a strong hand squeezed the fragile lady's hand, holding it in place and saving it from an inevitable collision with the floor, which was already ready to fall into panic. The aristocrat pressed his bride tightly to his chest, wrapping his arms around her, as if protecting her from the whole world. And at that moment, they both felt warmth and safety in each other's arms. Altair glared at the noblewoman and asked if she had come to this dark place alone. His voice filled with urgency and suspicion, as if he was looking for an answer that could change everything. The lady winced at the strong grip on her arm, and a question flashed in her eyes. Was she really going to run away from him, leaving everything behind? Or was it her inner fears that prevented her from doing so? Nadai began to speak out loudly, confidently, asserting that everything that was happening was completely different from what it seemed at first glance, and everyone had to understand this. Taking back her trembling hand, the noblewoman, with difficulty holding back her emotions, confidently declared that she had no intention of running away or abandoning the young master, despite the complexity of the situation. Their hands parted fingers, sliding slowly away from each other, and a sense of loss hung in the air, as if leaving behind only the soft warmth of memories of closeness that they would never forget. Nadia took responsibility for her choice, and looking confidently into his eyes, confirmed with words that she was going to do everything possible not to disappoint the Lord and justify his trust. The shocked man grabbed his head, unable to comprehend what was happening, as if trying to calm the chaos of thoughts and emotions seething in his mind. The girl asked her husband to tell her directly what he wanted from her, leaving no room for omissions and misunderstandings, so that their relationship would become more open and honest. The Lord stated that the lady should then begin by calling him by his first name, rather than his title, thus establishing a closer and more trusting relationship between them. With his arms folded across his chest, the man invited her to guess his real name, frowning with a slight mystery in his eyes, as if this question was just the beginning of an exciting game. Sweat ran down the lady's face when she realized that Altair was testing his bride in this way, testing the strength of their relationship and their readiness for openness. The girl decided to test her luck and go to her husband's game, hoping that after that, the guy would finally tell her what he really wants from her, revealing all the secrets of his intentions. The guy grabbed his head, realizing that Nadia would never be able to guess what he really wanted, and how difficult it was for him to open up to her with these feelings. After which, the aristocrat added that it was extremely difficult to find anything at night, which slightly amazed the lady who stood opposite with a stupid expression on her face. Without thinking twice, the nobleman grabbed his wife under the arm, and a frightened cry burst from her lips, cutting through the silence, instantly attracting the attention of those around her. Altair embarrassed the girl by saying that she glowed so brightly that she could light the way, causing the little girl to blush from the unexpected compliment and embarrassment. Waving her arms from side to side, the maiden screamed loudly that her companion had entangled her like a snake, causing everyone around her to bewildered by the bright reaction. Ignoring the girl who was resisting in his arms, the guy headed towards the bride's room, intending to accompany her, despite all the protests and resistance. The man began to explain that in the dark, Nadia could easily fall and suffer a fracture or other injury, emphasizing the importance of caution and safety in the current situation. Tired of his bride's constant objections, Altair calmly ordered her to be quiet, trying to remain calm and focused in order to resolve the issue at hand without unnecessary emotions and conflicts. Frustrated, the aristocrat bit her lip, feeling a wave of resentment wash over her, like a shadow that didn't want to leave its owner, leaving a feeling of discontent and irritation. The fragile hand collided with the bright glass, and in that moment the air filled with tension, as if reality itself froze, waiting for what would happen next. Looking at her reflection, Nadia realized that the owner of the castle did not want anyone inside to get hurt, carefully protecting everyone from possible dangers and inconveniences. Suddenly, the door opened with a loud creak, and a cry rang through the air, calling the lady as if a harbinger of an unexpected event that required her immediate attention. It was the maid who, with a serious expression on her face, informed the lady that the time had come and that she must go down, as if foreshadowing an important event that could not be delayed. Dinner was served and consisted of a variety of dishes, including tender meats and fresh vegetables, creating an impressive buffet that was pleasing to the eye and whet the appetite. Jumping up from her seat, the noblewoman realized with horror that she had completely forgotten about her husband's invitation to share the long-awaited meal with him, and a deep anxiety arose in her heart. Preparations for the dinner began to create the perfect image for the aristocracy, and the noblewoman carefully selected an outfit that would emphasize her refined taste and high position in society. With a heavy sigh, the beautiful Nadia suggested to the servants to leave her in this dress and not change, as she felt comfortable and confident in her outfit. The maid stood there awkwardly realizing that her mistress was right, and the woman's face filled with embarrassment at the thought of how important it was to maintain high status and style. People sat at the tables in the large hall, loudly discussing something important, and their animated conversations filled the space with an atmosphere of anticipation and intrigue. The men sitting at the table and confidently holding mugs of the strongest drinks in their hands were animatedly discussing the recently arrived lady, who seemed to have something strange and mysterious about her. One of the boys, an attractive young man with dark hair and bright yellow eyes, asked in confusion what exactly they meant, sincerely wanting to understand what was being discussed. At the head of the table, majestically seated on a throne, sat Altair, his head held high and his arms folded across his chest, radiating confidence and authority. The owner looked clearly irritated. The muscles on his face were noticeably playing, and the veins on his forehead were bulging, betraying his inner tension and confusion, which was noticeable to everyone present. Kane, the guy with the unusual eyes, was clearly unhappy with the guest's rude words about the owner's wife, which was reflected on his face and made him freeze in tension. It turned out that the problem was that all the locals from the poor region thought that a spoiled aristocrat from the capital, cunning and unpleasant, had come to them, which caused discontent and wariness in their eyes. Their lord's face was never marked by emotion, no matter what he felt inside. He always remained impassive, as if he were clad in armor made of stone. Kane, understanding the essence of the moment, held the drink tightly in his hand, and his gaze betrayed all the complex thoughts and feelings that were fighting inside him like a storm, demanding an outlet and resolution, not allowing him to leave his experiences unattended. However, Nadia, who was seen at the wedding, did not fit the negative image at all. She looked innocent and defenseless, like a ray of light surrounded by dark prejudices. And then, at the most inopportune moment, their beloved lord appeared covered in blood, thereby destroying the tense atmosphere that had previously been in the air and bringing an unexpected mixture of emotions to the situation. Thinking about the situation, Kane agreed that it did look strange. His mind was already trying to find an explanation for what was happening around him. There were rumors that the bride had been sent by Balgale himself, but this was unlikely given the lady's close ties to the Marquise, which raised many questions and doubts. After this, the boys burst out laughing, remembering how the lord's wife fainted at the wedding, which added to the atmosphere of fun and confusion, emphasizing the absurdity of the situation. After this, they suggested that Nadia was an angel sent to save their home from evil and misunderstanding, giving the whole situation a touch of mysticism and hope for the best. Standing up from his seat, Kane decided to sing a song to glorify the young aristocrat's wife, hoping that his voice would bring joy and inspiration to everyone present. The beauty herself, standing frozen in front of the door, felt like a general sending his soldiers out onto the battlefield full of determination and anticipation, ready to face any difficulties that might arise. Anna, deciding to show her concern, offered her help in opening the door for the lady, hoping to make this moment easier for her and support her in a difficult situation. Nadia felt excited, pressing her hands to her chest, reminding herself of her vow to remain determined despite the fear and uncertainty that was taking over her at that moment. Suddenly, she heard melodious music coming from behind the closed doors, and at the same moment, she noticed how a strip of light was shining from behind them, attracting attention and arousing curiosity. Laughing at the horrible singing, the lady felt the tension leave her cheeks turned red, and a sincere smile shone on her face, giving the moment lightness and joy. The aristocrat was met inside the hall with unfriendly glances from the people sitting around her, full of prejudice and condemnation, which created an atmosphere of tension and wariness, making her feel uncomfortable in this company. Altair looked especially evil, his red eyes glowing like burning coals, giving him a menacing look and hinting at his inner tension. The guys at the tables wondered whether she would now become their angel or goddess, and how a woman's presence would change their destinies, giving life new meaning and hope for the best. The owner of the mansion looked the most terrifying of all. His gloomy appearance and cold gaze created an atmosphere of fear and mistrust, making those around him feel uneasy. The lady felt fear, but then, suppressing her worries, she heard the maid offer her mistress a seat, hoping that this would help relieve the tense atmosphere. Sitting awkwardly at the table, Nadia clenched her hands into fists, her heart pounding wildly with excitement, and her thoughts jumbled in her head, creating a feeling of anxiety and uncertainty. The aristocrat, silently immersed in his thoughts, ate his food with a concentrated expression on his face, confidently holding the spoon in his hand. Therefore, the noblewoman concluded that it was time to begin the meal. The chicken looked especially delicious. It was golden fried and crispy, making you want to try it and enjoy every bite. The lady froze, holding her cutlery near her face, looking in surprise at the large chicken that was placed whole in front of her, as if it were a real holiday delicacy. The other men inside were not particularly concerned, with manners, happily eating their food, with their hands not paying attention to those around them, and creating an atmosphere of ease and freedom. Nadia almost cried, wanting to enjoy the food with the same appetite. But her manners did not allow her to do as she wanted, and she felt uncomfortable in this company. The man's hand suddenly and abruptly grabbed the food, taking it right from under the lady's nose, demonstrating complete disregard for the manners and customs that reigned at the table. The girl watched in fear as the food was taken away, as if it was her fault, and the feeling of awkwardness only increased her embarrassment and anxiety. But instead of leaving the little girl confused, the guy just carefully cut the meat into pieces to make it easier to eat, and then returned it to the beauty, thereby making it easier to eat. The man calmly asked if his companion was going to at least try this dish, thereby demonstrating an interest in women's preferences and trying to establish communication. Altair returned to his plate of food when Nadia couldn't help but loudly confirm that she was very hungry, reminding everyone of the importance of good food. As she brought the chicken pieces to her mouth with a fork, the girl felt joy from the kindness of her husband, who carefully cut this delicious and incredible dinner into pieces for her. The food tasted simply incredible. The meat was sweet like ripe fruit, and the vegetables added bright notes, creating a harmonious combination that pleased not only the stomach, but also the soul. Covering her cheek with her hands, the girl couldn't get enough of the food, which was so delicious that it resembled dishes from a five-star restaurant, delighting her every minute. However, Nadia froze in anticipation when she again felt her husband's gaze filling her heart with horror and mystery, as if he was looking for something important in her. The aristocrat's hands clenched into fists as the thought flashed through her mind that the man might want her to eat every last crumb, as if it were not only a dish, but also a test of her willpower. Smiling awkwardly, the lady declared that she would eat everything on the plate, after which the lord added, with a slight grin, that the maid could always bring more if she had room for one more dish. With a forced smile on her face, the lady thought about how her husband was a real villain, skillfully hiding his dark intentions behind charm and jokes, which only added intrigue to their relationship. The guy happily offered his bride to try the stew, which surprised her with its incredible taste, filling their evening with coziness and an atmosphere of real culinary pleasure. Horrified, Nadia didn't know how she would be able to eat another dish, but she tried not to upset the lord, realizing that his efforts and care deserved respect and gratitude. Crying to herself, the lady took a spoon to try the stew, feeling her heart clench from the conflicting emotions mixed with the delicate taste of the dish. She pressed her lips together, thinking about how she might throw up from overeating, trying to cope with the growing discomfort and maintain her dignity in the eyes of those around her. However, Cain intervened, welcoming the new lady into their humble abode, filling the atmosphere with warmth and hospitality that instantly distracted everyone from the tension at the table. Nadia looked up in surprise, not recognizing the guy standing in front of her, and his eyes reflected curiosity mixed with slight wariness, making her wonder about his intentions. Sitting down next to her, the man said with a kind smile that it was a real honor and a great joy for him to meet the noble wife of the Lord, who personified sophistication and grace. Suddenly, the aristocrat raised her finger up confidently, declaring that it was he who had recently performed the song that had so deeply touched her soul and left an indelible impression. Cain sheepishly put his hand to his face, modestly remarking that he would not dare to perform a melody in the presence of such a refined lady as she, and would prefer to remain in the shadows. Nadia admitted that the man sang so beautifully that his voice allowed her to relax and calm down, immersing her in an atmosphere of calm and peace. They began to exchange pleasantries modestly, and the man was clearly not used to receiving compliments, which added a note of awkwardness and sincerity to the conversation. Red Eyes watched their sweet and easy conversation with malice full of envy and jealousy, like a malicious shadow that threatened to disturb this moment of tenderness and innocence. Jealousy burned everywhere. Cain offered the lady a drink of the beer that was in the jug, confidently holding it in his hands, as if he wanted to make this moment even more memorable and relaxed. The girl decided not to refuse, and taking the drink, began to ask the man more about his life, with interest exploring the guy's history and trying to learn more about the person who had so unusually attracted attention. It turned out that Cain was a real hooligan who easily offered entertainment to everyone, present infecting the atmosphere with a playful mood and cheerful excitement. Suddenly, the servant began to tremble, begging the lady not to forget something important, and the previously playful mood instantly changed to fear enveloping them in a wary silence. Surprised with a slight tremor in her voice, the lady asked what had happened to her dear companion. Her eyes were full of anxiety and concern, reflecting genuine concern about his condition and fate. Cain jumped up from his seat and exclaimed that my lord was too cruel a man, his voice filled with emotion, reflecting his anger and displeasure at the injustice he had witnessed. The owner of the mansion emanated a negative aura, like an invisible shadow enveloping him, giving everything around him an ominous and disturbing tone. Placing his hand on his broad chest, the colonel began to justify himself persistently, assuring everyone around him that he bore no blame for the Lord's indecision, which had become the cause of their disagreement. Putting his hand on the place where the master had struck, Cain exclaimed that the man had no right to use his strength like that, because true masculinity lies in the ability to control one's emotions and actions. To this, the aristocrat declared that it seemed that the impudent knight, who had confused his strength with impunity and had forgotten the true meaning of nobility, should be brought to his senses once again. Amazed, the lady paused at the power of magic that her handsome husband was using, realizing how great and dangerous power could be when it was in the hands of such a cruel man. Auror was the name of magic in the form of glowing balls, possessing incredible strength and power, capable of both protecting and destroying, depending on the intentions of the caster. Only those who had reached the level of a sword master could use such magic, because this art required not only skill in handling weapons, but also a deep understanding of magic, its essence and power. Altair was one of the few who could gain such power, as it required not only perseverance and patience, but also the ability to combine magic with mastery of the sword. Frightened to the depths of her soul, the girl realized that this was to be expected from the main villain she had been told about, because his atrocities always brought only troubles and suffering. The Lord rudely ordered the newcomer to leave the hall unless he wished to undergo special training, with his strict mentor emphasizing his authority and inflexibility regarding discipline. Fearing the wrath of the master, the young man, agitated and trembling with fear, hurried to disappear from sight, trying to leave the hall unnoticed in order to avoid all possible troubles and consequences that could befall him. Before he left completely, Cain glanced at the young lady, realizing that this last moment could be decisive in his life, and doubt arose in his heart for a moment. Feeling a sharp pain in his forehead, the man realized that the Lord seemed to truly care for his new wife, showing concern and protecting her from any dangers that might threaten her. Waving his hand at his brother, The boy thought that everything would have been much simpler if Altair had immediately told them about his feelings for the aristocrat, thereby avoiding unnecessary misunderstandings and doubts. Left alone, the couple felt the silence and stillness that enveloped them during the meal, as if the atmosphere had covered them with an invisible blanket, forcing them to think about their feelings and relationships. Holding on to her glass of beer, the lady drank with meek embarrassment, feeling her full cheeks burn with shame, and thinking that the lord did not particularly enjoy the company of his bride, which was very rude of the nobleman. Looking down, the lady was afraid to start a conversation first and did not know how to overcome the awkwardness that had gripped them both, because every moment of silence seemed like an eternity filled with unspoken words. Suddenly, her body began to sway, and Nadia felt a strong desire to fall asleep, as if the warm embrace of sleep was beckoning the little girl, carrying her away from the worries and anxieties of reality. The man continued to drink the drink and would hardly have agreed to keep his wife company, because his thoughts were occupied with something else that did not allow him to be distracted and enjoy the conversation. Looking at her reflection in the drink, the girl felt sad at the thought that no one truly loved her, and this feeling of loneliness filled her fragile heart with coldness, making her think about her place in this world. Suddenly, the girl's face became determined, her brows furrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line, as if she were preparing to make an important decision despite all her fears and doubts. Nadia no longer wanted to be afraid of everything. Her feminine mind became clearer, and the fear of speaking her mind was left behind, giving way to courage and determination to be herself no matter the consequences. Jumping up from her seat, the lady began to loudly declare that this festive dinner was a complete bummer, not hesitating to express her dissatisfaction and say everything that had accumulated in her soul. Suddenly, her body stopped obeying, and the lady looked up in surprise, realizing that she could not control her actions and feeling excited about the unexpected situation. The woman's hand was grabbed by the wrist, by another man's attracting her attention, and causing excitement as if an invisible tension had arisen between them, ready to burst out at any moment. It was Altair, who decided that it was time for his wife to rest and sleep gently, but confidently, holding the lady's hand, showing his concern and desire to relieve her of unnecessary worries. All red and embarrassed, the lady awkwardly muttered that she was perfectly fine, and there was no reason to worry, although her trembling voice and downcast eyes clearly betrayed her inner agitation. The guy did not let go of her wrist, and holding her hand firmly, ordered the lady to calm down and not worry, trying with his confident tone to instill in her a sense of security, although the tension between them continued to grow. The girl quickly began to apologize when her hand involuntarily touched someone else's body, embarrassed by her inappropriate behavior, and realizing that it only worsened the already tense situation. The Lord asked in bewilderment why the lady kept apologizing to him, as if her endless apologies seemed strange and inappropriate to him, making him wonder about the reasons for her inner unrest. Feeling the world spinning around her, the maiden smiled weakly and explained that she was simply trying to expand her vocabulary, trying to hide her embarrassment behind this awkward excuse. Clutching his head, the man thought that everything that was happening was sheer nonsense, as if the world around him had lost all logic, and he could no longer understand where reality ended and madness began. Without thinking twice, the strong lord picked up his wife in his arms, deciding that it would be easier to help her get to her chambers, trying to show care and tenderness despite the tension that hung between them. Frightened, Nadia screamed in surprise and grabbed the guy tightly, her heart pounding in her chest, and fear completely enveloped the beauty like a dark cloud, making her feel vulnerable. The man looked away and explained that it would be better than stumbling at every step, but the lord's ears turned red with embarrassment, and he felt uncomfortable under the close attention. Nadia couldn't believe her eyes, because the villain, whom she considered heartless and ruthless, looked confused, which caused unexpected feelings in her, and questioned all her previous beliefs about him. In the end, all the problems were hidden in the beer, which clouded their minds, causing them to make strange decisions and see things distortedly, as if the world around them had become devoid of common sense. Leaning on her arms, the lady fell asleep, quietly plunging into a sleep that allowed her to temporarily forget about the worries and concerns that had tormented her for a long time, and to feel the peace that was so necessary. With a smile, the aristocrat watched his wife, who so sweetly displayed courage during intoxication, while at ordinary moments she was trembling with uncertainty, as if two completely different personalities were fighting inside her. He thought to himself that they were the same age but completely different. She seemed to be strong and vulnerable at the same time, and this diversity attracted him even more, making him feel a deep connection between them. Altair himself will forever remain a mercenary, who was not destined to become an aristocrat or a gentleman burdened by the rules and conventions of high society, preferring freedom. It made sense that the lady would be so afraid of the guy who had decisively raised his hand to stroke her cotton candy pink hair. The movement evoked a sense of vulnerability and uncertainty in their relationship. Suddenly, the nobleman was distracted by the butler, who, lifting the mustard pot in his hands, could hardly stay on his feet, which added comicality to the situation and made everyone pay attention to him. Altair, embarrassed, realized that he himself would have to help his wife change her clothes, and this thought made him feel awkward because he did not know how to properly handle such a task while remaining delicate and considerate. Anger arose inside the former mercenary at the thought of someone else looking at his bride's naked body, and this feeling of jealousy burned like fire, making his heart beat faster from misunderstanding and rage. The Lord was bombarded with reproaches, which he accepted with dignity, although his heart was in turmoil. The guy understood that sooner or later, the first wedding night had to take place between the couple, and this moment was getting closer and closer. The butler adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose and asked who could have advised such a stupid thing for a lord to show up to his own wedding covered in blood, since it was not only inappropriate, but also cast a shadow on the solemn event that was supposed to be the beginning. Altair, answering with a slight smile, remarked that the butler had apparently conspired with his brother, since they were both telling him the same thing, as if trying to convince him of some absurd decision he had recently made. After which, the Lord asked the servants what happened to the man they left alive, his voice full of tension and curiosity. The subordinate's coldly spoken reply was that blank was certain that the person in question had intended to kill the Lord's wife, and that added to the tension in the situation. The man looked down at his bride, who seemed to be barely able to withstand the onslaught of the unexpected attack, and a feeling of concern for her safety flared up inside him. He could not allow something terrible to happen to her. Balgale was a fearsome and vile man, willing to pursue an easy target in order to get close to his enemy and carry out the evil plans that lurked in his dark mind. With a voice trembling with fatigue, the poor butler said that he wanted to leave since carrying the sweet and sleeping maid had become a real burden for him, and all his strength was running out. The aristocrat was left alone in the room with his bride, immersed in an atmosphere of solitude, where the silence was filled with exciting thoughts about what future awaited them ahead and what trials their love might face. The girl blushed, and her cheeks glowed with a blush, giving her face a gentle and touching look, as if she was filled with embarrassment or delight, causing a feeling of warmth and charm in those around her. He had a delicate obstacle to overcome. His lovely and beautiful wife was sleeping peacefully in his arms, serenely immersed in her sweet dreams, unaware of his intentions. Warm rays of sunlight streamed through the window into the room, illuminating everything around, and filling the space with soft light, creating an atmosphere of comfort and harmony. The lady suddenly grabbed her head, feeling unbearable pain, which tormented her after a stormy night of merry celebrations, and a severe hangover that left unforgettable consequences. The memories of his wild deeds on that long night, full of joy and madness, suddenly disappeared, as if they had never happened, leaving only a feeling of slight nostalgia. She pressed her hand to her face and tried to remember how, as if in a dream, she had returned back to her room. But her memory was filled with only vague images and a feeling of confusion. Suddenly, the aristocrat's attention was drawn to the fact that the threads on her back were untied, creating an appearance of carelessness that contrasted sharply with her refined image. Nadia was experiencing excruciating nausea, and realizing that the condition was unbearable, she knew she had to drink water as soon as possible to ease her suffering and restore her sense of calm. The maid looked no better than her mistress. Her clothes were shabby and untidy, and the fatigue hanging over her face betrayed the difficult hours spent in endless cares and worries. Nadia anxiously asked if there was anyone who could replace the maid, as she looked as if she had turned into a dead ghost, completely devoid of life energy and light. Thoughtfully, Anna began to reflect on the fact that there had once been Paul, but unfortunately, he had been a man who had performed his duties, and there were no other people around at that moment. The aristocrat hastened to clarify that she had in mind a completely different maid, whom she considered more suitable for performing the necessary tasks and duties. It turned out that in such a huge and majestic castle, full of luxury and historical secrets, there were surprisingly few servants, which caused slight anxiety and bewilderment among the guests and inhabitants who expected more assistance. The noblewoman was stunned by the fact that such a young servant looked so small and fragile, but at the same time managed to cope with so many tasks, causing admiration and surprise. Paul was an equally diligent butler, managing the paperwork and all the affairs of the house with impeccable care and attention to detail, performing his duties with incredible dedication and attention to detail. Putting her hand to her head, Nadia realized that all the responsibilities of the house were falling on the shoulders of one single maid, which created an incredible burden and put her in a difficult position. Anna only bowed her head, unable to understand the deep feelings of the lady, who seemed to be overwhelmed by a storm of emotions hidden behind a quiet and calm appearance. The maiden mentally thought about how cruel the Lord was, who hired so few servants, forcing them to perform many difficult tasks, as if testing their strength. While the lady sat in bed upset and lost in gloomy thoughts about her plight, the maid stood next to the tray, waiting for her kind mistress to pay attention to her. Anna, overcome with anxiety and uncertainty, wondered whether she should call the butler, who could come to her aid and help her deal with the difficulties that tormented her soul and mind. Suddenly, a vivid memory of little Nadia as a child, sitting on her mother's lap, enjoying the gentle swinging motion, came into my mind. It was a time of serenity and happiness, when the world seemed so carefree. Then Mother gave wise advice. In order to get used to a new place, first of all, it was necessary to get to know and make friends with the local servants. This approach helped to establish relationships and create a cozy atmosphere around oneself. So the lady resolutely confirmed that she wanted to meet the butler, but before that, she would definitely have to take a bath. She believed that refreshing herself and taking care of herself would help her feel confident in appearing before important people. Sitting in the warm water, the lady enjoyed every minute, feeling the tension leave her body because the foam gently enveloped her, creating an atmosphere of comfort and relaxation, allowing her to forget about her worries. On the table, a multitude of bottles and vials of shampoos were comfortably arranged, emitting various aromas that smelled pleasantly, filling the space with an atmosphere of true luxury and comfort, as if inviting one to relax. Suddenly, her gaze caught on an empty shelf, and Nadia realized that the most important bottle was missing. This realization came as an unpleasant surprise to her, because without the necessary product, she could not fully enjoy the process of preparing for the meeting. The lady, suddenly realizing with confusion that she had nothing to dry herself with, fell into a slight panic, because the warm water was slowly cooling, leaving her less and less time to make a decision. Bare feet touched the floor, leaving wet footprints behind them. The floor was stained with hurried footsteps that echoed loudly. Thinking that Anna had come to her, Nadia quickly ran out of the bathroom, calling the maid by name. The lady felt her excitement growing and understood that she needed to act quickly now. However, instead of the maid, Altair stood in the room, his mouth hanging open in surprise, his eyes wide open. The unexpected appearance added even more confusion to the already tense situation, and the beauty felt her face flush. The man quickly slammed the door, trying to do it as quietly as possible, so that no one else could catch a glimpse of his naked wife, whose beauty he wanted to keep only for himself. The aristocrat's face instantly flushed as the maiden realized the seriousness of the situation she had found herself in, as if all her noble dignity had been shaken by one unexpected situation. The lord didn't have time to utter a word, as the lady, without giving him a chance to answer, quickly disappeared behind the half-open door, returning back to the bathroom, as if trying to escape the awkwardness of the moment. Embarrassed to the depths of her soul, Nadia pressed her hands to her chest, not knowing what to do with herself from the shame that had overcome her, as if hoping that this would protect her from her own experiences and the looks of others. A knight entered the room and immediately noticed that his master stood there flushed deeply. The man's entire face was ablaze with hidden emotions that he was trying in vain to suppress. Without rushing to explain what had happened, Altair answered his subordinate, rudely adding that he had heard the young lady scream earlier. This justified his abruptness and reluctance to go into details. A moment later, the door in front of him slammed shut with a loud bang, leaving the man standing in the empty corridor, as if he had been thrown out of not only the room, but also someone else's trust. Silently in his thoughts, the aristocrat was indignant at himself for his stupid reaction. Instead of simply turning away, he stood motionless like a statue in front of his naked wife, amazed by the unexpected situation. Nadia finally came out of the bathroom, looking around in surprise. She had not expected anyone to be in her room, and she realized with displeasure that she should have warned them in advance of her arrival. It was clearly ridiculous for the Lord to think of warning anyone of his arrival. He was the master of this entire house and could move freely wherever he wanted without giving any signs of attention. Nadia muttered in confusion that the room was hers, and therefore she had every right to privacy. The words sounded like a reminder that personal space should be respected. However, the noblewoman immediately shuddered, realizing that this room did not belong only to her, but was part of their common quarters. The sudden realization that her privacy was violated filled her with anxiety and confusion. Altair, arms folded across his chest and face expressionless, confidently stated that it was perfectly normal for him to share a bed with someone, as if it were the natural state of things. Clenching her hands into fists in front of her, Nadia began to justify herself, stating that she had never heard anything like this before, and was completely unprepared for such a turn of events. Moreover, if something like this were to actually happen, the aristocrats would certainly begin to reproach each other for their unworthy behavior, casting cold glances full of condemnation and disdain. The lady decided to explain to her husband that since her parents came from a noble family, they always slept in different rooms, adhering to the traditions and norms accepted in their circle. Suddenly, a jacket was thrown over the girl's shoulders as she was shivering from the cold after taking a bath, and the soft fabric instantly warmed her, giving her confidence and cozy warmth in this difficult moment. The door slammed behind the lord so quickly that the aristocrat did not have time to say a word, and now she was left alone, feeling how silence filled the room, leaving only her own thoughts and feelings. Nadia, thinking hard, could not get rid of the obsessive thought about whether the man was really showing interest in her, and what could have attracted the guy's attention at this very moment, when she felt especially vulnerable. Altair walked down the corridor, his face covered in darkness, and without any emotion, as if he was lost in silent thoughts that were inaccessible to those around him. In his thoughts, Nadia appeared with her naivety, purity, and vulnerability, as if she personified an innocence that amazed and inspired at the same time. He covered his embarrassed face with his hand, feeling how he could barely restrain himself from attacking his bride's enticing scent and devouring her in a fit of desire. Thus, the butler, carrying important documents in his hands, finally found his master, realizing how important these papers were for making further decisions and conducting affairs that required immediate attention and concentration. Concerned by the strange behavior of the lord, the servants decided to ask if everything was all right with him, because his gloomy appearance and absent smile could not help but cause alarm and concern. To this question, Altair replied that everything was fine, and then pointed with surprise at the mountain of papers that was piled up on the table, as if hinting at the indescribable number of matters and concerns that would not be resolved by themselves. The nobleman, realizing that these were bills, added that he was ready to help the new lady deal with them if the beauty could not cope with this task herself, offering his support. The butler nodded at the gentleman's decision, although he himself was sure that Nadia came from a prestigious family and had a good education, which should have helped her cope with the difficulties that arose. Before the butler could take a step, the lord shouted loudly for him to stop and not even think about going into his sweet wife's room, giving his words a tone of severity and protection. The nobleman ordered his subordinate to come to the lady in an hour, or better yet, in 2, while his ears were burning red, betraying the embarrassment that he tried to hide, realizing that such an assignment required special caution and tact in relation to the lady. The subordinate, with an incomprehensible expression on his face, listened attentively as they talked about the hours in which one could get to the bride, and in the meantime they were getting longer. The young gentleman, not wanting to listen to the servants any longer, turned sharply, and with a determined look, walked away quickly, not paying attention to their surprised glances. The door slowly swung open, and a mysterious figure of a man appeared before the eyes, as if woven from the twilight, emerging unexpectedly and silently, as if the darkness itself had given birth to it. Anna, with a sweet and welcoming smile, politely informed the lady that the food had already been served on the table and that she could begin her meal. Her voice sounded soft and enveloping, creating a feeling of coziness and warmth. Nadia sat on the couch all wet from the shower because she had not used a towel. A man's jacket was lying on her shoulders, which she had thrown on to keep warm despite the damp strands of her hair and the coolness that enveloped her. The maid immediately bowed deeply, sincerely, asking for forgiveness from the lady of noble blood, expressing all her respect and humility before her high status. When asked whether it was worth sharing a room with the groom, the maid answered in the affirmative, explaining that they were already a couple, and there was nothing reprehensible in this, since their union was obvious to everyone. After this, Nadia said that in the capital, everything was happening completely differently, and lately she had been feeling quite bad, which worried the very lovely girl. The lady blushed all over from the realization that she would now have to sleep every night in the same bed with the master of the house, and this thought awakened mixed feelings in her. The beauty was most afraid that the scary man with whom she was to share a bed would at some point yell at her and order her to sleep on the floor, which filled her soul with anxiety and fear. Turning to the table, the lady noticed a sofa on which, in the worst case, she could spend the night, which suddenly inspired a slight hope of salvation from an uncomfortable situation. Anna thought for a moment, and then told her that she had recently met the butler on behalf of the lady. He had said something strange. Before coming to the lady's chambers, he had to wait 5 whole hours, which had puzzled her. Waving her hand, as if not attaching any importance to the servant's words, the mustard-haired lady invited the noblewoman to join her at the table during the meal, hoping that this would lift her spirits. The hands on the clock confidently indicated that time had expired, as if emphasizing the inevitability of what was happening around, and reminding us that every minute had its own meaning. The butler arrived exactly 5 hours later, as the lady had ordered, holding important documents in his hands, and Nadia was sitting next to him, watching the proceedings with a slight sense of excitement. Having calmly introduced himself, the servant added that Blank was his younger brother, which surprised the lady, making the little girl think about family ties that she had no idea about. Blank was the man who stood in for the lord at the wedding ceremony. His handsome appearance left an unforgettable impression on everyone present, who now could not get rid of the memories of that moment. The butler threw a pile of paper on the table on which were printed the bills for the last 3 years, and looking at the young mistress of the mansion, said that now this was a woman's responsibility. Nadia soon realized that things were not going well at home, and smiling decided to openly admit it out loud, feeling the need to share her thoughts with those around her. The guy noticed that their lands were not located in the most favorable area, where there was no rich harvest, which in turn created problems for their budget. In addition, their lands were often used for hunting magical creatures, which regularly attacked their territories, creating additional problems for life and economies. The work of knights was not much different from that of mercenaries, as they were also engaged in guarding the lord's house and ensuring the safety of his territory. Looking down, the lady realized that they had no permanent source of income, and the magical creatures could attack at any time they wanted, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear. Having grabbed the documents in her hands, the lady confidently promised that she would definitely familiarize herself with all the contracts and invoices in order to have a complete understanding of the situation. With a smile, the girl promised that despite the fact that she was a stranger to them, she would still try to become a worthy wife for the master, showing her readiness for change. The servants were obviously struck by the kindness and attention that the lady showed, not expecting her to treat them with such care, and this behavior made a strong impression on them. An oppressive silence reigned among the people, and the noblewoman began to fidget nervously, realizing that her careless words had caused discontent and tension. In the end, the guy smiled and said that the work would definitely turn out well, inspiring everyone around him, with hope for their cooperation. The butler bowed respectfully and politely asked the lovely hostess to take care of both their home and himself, trusting in her wisdom and care. After the servant assured her that she would do everything possible to maintain the lady's enthusiasm, she felt a warm light of hope and support flaring up around her. There was a whole stack of paper lying untidily on the table, as if forgotten, and left to the mercy of fate, waiting for someone to pay attention to it and put it in order. It suddenly became dark, and a dim light began to flow lazily from the windows, painting the surrounding space in gray and gloomy shades, as if the evening was trying to hide the last remnants of daylight from us. Nadia didn't even notice how time flew by, immersed in working with documentation, until everything around her darkened, and the evening enveloped her with its quiet but persistent shadow. As she warmed up and stretched her arms forward, the girl thought that perhaps she had overexerted herself, feeling a slight fatigue in her muscles after a long day at work. Suddenly, the girl's attention was drawn to the jacket, which was elegantly hanging on a hanger, as if it was waiting for its moment to be put on again and go to a meeting. The image of the maid suddenly popped into her head, and she was shocked that it seemed the Lord had no intention of spending the night in this room, leaving her in the dark about his plans. Nadia no longer knew what she should do, as she was completely carried away by the documents, and did not notice how she missed important details that could affect further actions. That night, they finally decided to spend time together with the aristocrat, in one cozy room, filled with soft light and an atmosphere of mystery. Pressing her palms to her red cheeks, the noblewoman strictly ordered herself to breathe more calmly, trying to calm her heated emotions and restore her inner balance. Altair was a truly terrifying and fearful man, whose presence caused awe and fear in all who crossed his path, causing hearts to skip a beat in terror. Shaking her head from side to side and closing her eyes, the maiden firmly stated that it was not such a big problem at all, trying to convince herself of her fortitude. The next morning arrived, and the castle rising majestically against the bright sky seemed even more mysterious and enigmatic than before, plunging everything around into an atmosphere of anticipation. Nadia woke up to find no one in the bed next to her. As she sank into the silence of the morning light, she felt a slight anxiety that immediately enveloped her thoughts. During the night, no one appeared, and the lady slept alone without a companion, immersed in silence and tranquility. A slight uneasiness was felt in her heart, but the darkness of the night enveloped her in a soft cover, allowing her to forget herself in a sweet dream. Apparently, Melissa was right, and the Lord could not allow himself to do this in bed with a lady, since such actions were contrary to his principles and rules. Lying on the pillows, Nadia was lost in thought about whether she should get married at all. Thoughts about the future were intertwined with doubts, and she could not get rid of the feeling of uncertainty that gripped her fragile heart. The butler greeted the lady, announcing that he was ready to give her a tour of the castle, to show her the majestic halls and hidden corners full of history and mysteries. The lady obediently followed the servants, gradually realizing that the situation in the mansion was much more dire than she could have imagined and required immediate action. There was little money, and the budget remained tight, which forced every decision to be carefully considered and limited room for maneuver. Pressing her palm to her chin, the beauty thoughtfully reflected on the fact that making money in this deserted territory was indeed extremely difficult and required a lot of effort. Paul answered the young lady, pointing to the room where the knights lived and trained, filling her thoughts with images of strict discipline and dedication to the cause. The little girl watched the training fights unfolding outside the window with a thoughtful look, as if trying to catch something important in every movement of the fighters. The two young men clashed fiercely on the field, honing their sword-fighting skills, as if each blow was filled with determination and the desire to win. Altair acted as if no one could compare to him, demonstrating amazing mastery of the blade, like a true professional confident in every move. Nadia anxiously asked her companion where her husband had spent his last nights, and in response, heard disappointing and disturbing news, which only increased the doubts that had arisen. The butler was equally surprised when it turned out that the gentleman had not spent the night in his chambers for the last few days, and this strange discovery raised many questions in his mind. Turning to the window, the servant shouted the master's name with full determination, trying to attract the attention of everyone present, because his voice was filled with anxiety and insistence, demanding an immediate answer. Raising his hand to his glasses, he loudly asked the Lord if he had spent the night in the room that had not been cleaned for the last few days and looked neglected. Altair was frustrated that he was suddenly taken away from his sword training, preventing him from continuing to hone his craft and improve his skills. A heated argument broke out between the men about where exactly the master of the estate was supposed to spend the night, and each of them insisted on his own version, trying to convince the others that he was right. Suddenly, the lady and the aristocrat's gazes met, and Nadia, full of hope, began to wonder if her husband might not be as angry with her as she imagined, and that there might still be room for understanding and forgiveness in their relationship. All in red, the lady thought for a moment, and quietly repeated to herself that perhaps Altair simply did not want to cause her inconvenience, which is why he did not come to their common quarters. Embarrassed, the Lord quickly turned away, his ears glowing scarlet. There was awkwardness and a desire to hide his true emotions from those around him because he felt curious glances directed at him. The subjects were deeply surprised by such an unexpected reaction from a nobleman who was usually calm and collected, and their bewilderment was only increased by the fact that this behavior was completely uncharacteristic of him. Nadia understood this reaction in her own way. It seemed to her that the man was tired of her stupid behavior and no longer wanted to see his wife, which only increased the feeling of guilt and regret. The butler hastened to calm the beauty, assuring the lady that there was no reason to worry, and tried to convey to her the atmosphere of calm that reigned around. The courtier was deeply shocked to learn that the master had actually seen the bride naked when she left the room after taking a bath, and this discovery came as a real shock to him. Sweat began to run down the lady's face, and she realized that she had crossed the line in a careless and stupid way, which only increased the unpleasant feeling of awkwardness and shame for her behavior. Every noble man dreamed of having an innocent and pure maiden, not spoiled by vulgarity and worldly temptations, who would personify the ideals of virtue and innocence. And Nadia, finding herself naked in front of her husband, felt like a rabbit in the clutches of a predator, experiencing mixed feelings of fear and vulnerability, realizing the fragility of her situation. Her palm gripped the fabric of her dress tightly, her fingers sinking into the pleasant material as if it would help her gather her thoughts and gain confidence. The butler could only watch the escape of the master's wife, who could not bear the embarrassment, and quickly left the room, leaving behind an atmosphere of awkwardness. Hurriedly descending the steps, the aristocrat hoped that she would be able to catch the gentleman before the end of his sword training, wanting to see his skill in combat and support him in this hobby. Altair found himself next to the door, ready to leave his confident stance, betraying his determination to leave everything behind and move on to new challenges. Hearing a strange sound, the nobleman turned around, deciding to check what exactly caused this noise, and a strange curiosity made him alert, expecting something unexpected. The lady herself realized that she was starting to fall, tripping over a step, and in a panic, she tried to grab the railing so as not to lose her balance and avoid an unpleasant fall. The lady fell onto something soft, onto the body of the Lord, who looked at his sweet bride in shock, not believing what had happened and not knowing how to react to this unexpected situation. The girl wanted to get up from the man, but her legs wouldn't obey, and she again found herself in the position of a rabbit in the clutches of a predator, feeling his gaze on her, and all her vulnerability in this awkward position. Altair lowered his head to get closer to the maiden and asked in a soft tone if she had any important question to ask him, hoping that it would help ease the tension between them. The guy froze in shock, realizing that the lady wanted to leave her chambers so that her husband could return back, and this discovery amazed him because he did not expect such a turn of events. Altair, not understanding what mistake the girl was talking about with genuine interest, turned to her with a request to explain the situation in more detail, hoping to clarify the woman's feelings and grasp the essence of the misunderstanding that seemed to be bothering her greatly. It turned out that Nadia blamed herself for her unworthy behavior, feeling that she had acted foolishly for a young and noble aristocrat when she appeared naked in front of her husband. The beauty soon noticed that the man began to avoid his wife more often, no matter where they were, and this alarmed the little girl, causing doubts and anxiety. Embarrassed, the Lord lowered his head to his hand and explained that he was doing this out of fear of not being able to restrain himself and doing something bad to his wife, realizing the full complexity of his feelings. Altair did not notice anything suspicious in his companion's behavior and decided not to think about it anymore, trying to push away disturbing thoughts and focus on something else. The beauty couldn't believe how kind and considerate the main villain of the novel was towards her, which completely turned her idea of him upside down. Helping his interlocutor to her feet, the man listened with a satisfied smile as she finally realized his point, which brought him a feeling of deep satisfaction. Suddenly, Nadia sneezed loudly, quickly, covering her face with her hands, as if trying to hide her embarrassment from this sudden impulse, which caught her by surprise at the most inopportune moment. Altair, noticing the woman's condition, immediately thought that she was ill, and not wanting to risk her health, asked the little girl to stay where she was, while he went to get a doctor. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a servant who unexpectedly appeared on the stairs, ruining that rare moment of privacy and disturbing their thoughts. Irritated, the man asked, with obvious displeasure, whether the butler was giving the beautiful aristocrat a tour since he had been nearby the whole time. After this, the lady promised that, in the future, she would warn in advance about her forays in order to avoid misunderstandings and maintain peace in the relationship. The Lord turned to the servants with concern, ordering them to accompany his wife to her chambers, since she was tired and needed rest after a long and stressful day full of worries and troubles. The two of them headed towards the bedroom, and along the way, Paul enthusiastically told interesting stories about the house, sharing curious details and secrets that made it a picturesque place. Altair himself was talking about something with the butler's brother, discussing important issues that concerned both their personal affairs and the general state of affairs in the house. Blank was unhappy with his master, who did not sleep next to his wife, as he was afraid of himself and his feelings, which caused him internal conflict and bewilderment. Blank felt resentment towards his master, who avoided sleeping next to his bride, because he was afraid of his own feelings, which created an internal conflict within him. Suddenly, there was a sharp blow. The Lord, unable to restrain himself, kicked his subordinate, who at that moment did not expect such a sharp reaction. Blank, clutching his painful leg, could hardly contain his anger and indignation, not understanding how such an unfortunate situation could happen to him at this very moment. Altair was not at all pleased when he was compared to a peacock as narcissistic and beautiful as he was. Indignation flared up in his soul because he aspired to be more than just a spectacular external image. Rubbing his stiff neck, the aristocrat explained, with a dissatisfied sigh, that every time he opened his mouth, he uttered some nonsense that was incapable of causing anything but laughter from those around him. Blank decided to support the nobleman, demonstrating to him how to smile properly in order to impress the lady of his heart and inspire his friend to new feats in winning her favor. The Lord did not appreciate the diligence of his subordinate, and with obvious disdain said that he was about to vomit from such a sweet and feigned smile, which only caused disgust. After this, the Lord thought and remembered that with a brave, courageous knight, there were always many girls in love, ready to admire their exploits and romance. Having shown a bright example on his face, the guy with a smile suggested the aristocrat to repeat the same charming smile, believing that this would help him win the lady's heart, because self-confidence was capable of working real miracles. He immediately remembered the young Nadia, who looked like a frightened rabbit, looking back at her husband in fear, as if expecting something terrible and unpredictable from him. Altair eventually agreed, and a sinister grin appeared on his face, which was so terrible that it seemed as if he himself had become a maniac ready for unpredictable actions. Blank froze in horror, and with a trembling voice said that the nobleman should not smile at all anymore, because such a terrifying grin could easily scare the most terrible monsters. After striking his subordinate, Altair turned away and headed in the opposite direction, angry at the foolish knight, who seemed to only make the situation worse with his reckless behavior. The boys sat at the table, listening attentively to the words of their master, who, with a serious expression on his face, set out his thoughts and plans, enveloping them in an atmosphere of importance and responsibility. Blank, red with excitement, gave a solemn speech emphasizing that they should all unite to protect their home from the impending threat, instilling a sense of unity in everyone. After this, the man pointed his stick at the board, where the topic was announced, about how to bring the gentleman together with his bride, so that they could finally kiss, which caused a slight smile among those gathered. The young people immediately came alive in the room, supporting each other's ideas and jokes, creating an atmosphere of fun and anticipation, full of enthusiasm and friendly brotherhood. Paul adjusted his glasses and, with a dissatisfied sigh, complained about finding himself in such a stupid environment where he was surrounded only by ridiculous ideas and jokes. One of the guys raised his finger up and enthusiastically declared that their lord was so strong that he could even deal with a goblin, emphasizing the fighter's strength and bravery. An argument broke out between the other two men, which quickly turned violent, causing them to jump up from their seats and wave their arms vigorously, trying to prove their case and attract the attention of those around them. The bravest of the men suggested getting the couple drunk and leaving them alone in one room, believing that such a prank could lead to funny consequences and bring them closer together. Suddenly, a mysterious voice was heard, mocking the ideas of those present, causing everyone to freeze in surprise and bewilderment, as if someone invisible was watching them and making fun of their plans. It was Cain who looked at them with amusement and clearly had more sensible suggestions on how to unite two lovers' hearts than all their ideas put together. It was Cain who, looking at them with a sneer, clearly had more sensible suggestions on how to unite two lovers' hearts than all their ideas put together, and seemed ready to share his plan. And then he went up on stage and announced that one should help another in a difficult situation, as if he were a knight ready to come to the aid of a beautiful lady in distress. The butler realized that Cain meant to arrange for Nadia to be in a difficult situation, while Altair, on the contrary, was supposed to help the unfortunate girl, showing his valor and nobility. The servant doubted that the master really intended to put the aristocrat in such a fragile position in order to then become a knight who came to her aid, because this could have unpredictable consequences. Cain smiled slyly, saying that then they should do it without their master's consent, and in secret, so that no one would know of his intentions, which added spice to the whole plan. In the distance, majestic mountains stretch out their snow-capped peaks, glittering in the sun like precious stones. At the foot of the mountains, a dense forest stretches the green crowns of the trees, creating picturesque patterns. Nadia, in new white clothes and with pink braids, was impressed by the beautiful landscape that opened before her eyes, captivating her with its colors and the harmony of nature. Looking around with a wide smile, the lady realized that Anna was right. She really needed to breathe some fresh air, because it helped her to escape from her worries and enjoy the beauty of the world around her. At that moment, the maid brought tea and noticed that the mistress was sad, sitting on the sofa, immersed in her thoughts, and as if lost in the peaceful comfort of the room. So Anna suggested that the noblewoman take a walk to relax outside after a long day of reading, believing that fresh air and a change of scenery would lift her spirits. At first, Nadia had resisted the idea of the walk, but now that they were out in the fresh air, she felt grateful for her persistence, which had allowed her to accompany her lady. Sitting at the helm of the boat and grabbing the oars, the maid waited for the aristocrat to enjoy a walk along the lake together, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of nature reflected in the water's surface. Up close, the lady noted how beautiful the mountain slope was, with the water sparkling in the sun and the fresh scent of grass filling the air, creating an atmosphere of peace and enjoyment of nature. The blue crystal rebirth stone was the only one that could charge magical items, emitting an amazing glow and containing the power to awaken ancient spells. And it was Altair, according to the plot of the novel, who discovered the Shathu and took possession of this artifact, becoming powerful and rich, which opened up new horizons of opportunity and adventure for him. Having become a baroness, Nadia realized that a man would hardly pay attention to her even after that stupid fall, which only aggravated her feeling of insecurity in his eyes. Clenching her hand into a fist in front of her, the maiden reflected that as long as she performed her role well, the lord had no reason to offend the bride, and this gave her confidence in her position. Suddenly, a loud cry attracted the attention of the noblewoman, and she asked the maid what had happened, worried about the unexpected noise, and what could have caused such a commotion. The oar floated in the water, gradually separating from the boat, as if wanting to set off on its own voyage, giving the scene a sense of lightness and peace. Anna cried loudly, screaming about how stupid she had been, and that they now needed to come up with a plan as quickly as possible that would help the poor lady in such a difficult situation, causing her to feel hopeless. Putting her hand to her chin, the girl thought about what she should do, considering all the possible options and trying to find the best solution to her problem. After this, the aristocrat gently asked the maid to calm down, noting that Nadia was quite capable of getting the oar out of the lake on her own, and there was no need to worry about it. In horror, as the lady threw herself into the water, without hesitation, not even thinking about the possible consequences, as if nothing could stop her. Breathing heavily, the lady swam towards the desired object, trying with all her might, while the worried maid worried about her, could hardly contain her anxiety. Nadia didn't have time to really understand what had happened, when suddenly the lake, like a living creature, swallowed the aristocrat's body, dragging her into its dark and cold depths, leaving only light circles on the surface of the water. Altair was leisurely strolling with his knights, enjoying the peace, but suddenly, hearing a strange sound from the lake, he stopped and asked with interest what was going on there. Kane and Blank, in a humorous mood, made a whole show of declaring that there was probably a horde of evil goblins hiding there that had to be immediately defeated in a great battle. Altair quickly saw through his subjects, realizing that they were putting on a real circus, trying to entertain him with their theatrical antics, although he watched their funny game without a smile. With a displeased expression, the man declared that since his knights had decided to indulge in such fun, he would have to make their training more difficult, so that they would not even think about putting on a show of two actors, instead of serious work. The boys froze in fear at the thought that the master might arrange a training fight for them, realizing that it would be a serious test of their skills and endurance. The boys froze in fear at the thought that the gentleman could arrange a training fight for them, realizing that this would be a real test of their skills and endurance for which they were not prepared. Blank rushed to push the man away, declaring that he was first and had no intention of giving up his place or right to participate in the discussion. The Lord realized with surprise that his subordinates had come up with real nonsense, and this sudden realization left him feeling disappointed, as he had expected more reasonable and constructive proposals from people he considered part of his team. But suddenly, he noticed Nadia drowning in the water next to the boat, and his heart instantly sank with horror, forcing him to rush to help, forgetting about all his worries. The young men looked at the drowning lady in horror, realizing that their plan was collapsing right before their eyes, and that now their main task was to save her and not to implement the plans they had dreamed of for so long. According to their plan, the Lord was supposed to help and find the oar in order to become a hero and save the ladies, thus strengthening his reputation and winning their sympathy. Nadia will then fall in love with her savior. The Lord and their bond will become stronger, which will lead to them being together, overcoming all difficulties, and enjoying every moment of their new happiness. The man walked quickly towards the lake, determined to save his beloved, and his heart pounded with excitement and determination, because every moment counted. He carefully lifted the lady into his arms and carried her out of the water, feeling the woman's body trembling from the cold. But at the same time, his heart was filled with determination and hope. Nadia lay unconscious on the grass, not breathing, and anxiety gripped everyone nearby, forcing them to look for ways to bring the girl back to life, not knowing how critical the situation was. Altair, overcome with anxiety, shouted loudly, demanding that his subordinates immediately bring a doctor, his voice sounding full of determination and panicked concern for the fate of his beloved lying unconscious on the grass. Kane froze in front of his master, not knowing how to apologize for the stupid plan that led to such an unpleasant situation, and his internal doubts only made the moment even more awkward. Altair realized in horror that the lady urgently needed help to start breathing, and he felt fear taking hold of him, forcing him to act quickly and decisively. The pulse was weak, and the lady's chest did not rise, causing the aristocrat deep anxiety, as he realized that every second counted, and it was necessary to do everything immediately. Without thinking twice, the man began to give his beloved artificial respiration, trying to breathe life into her. His heart began to beat in unison, with the hope that she would be able to return to him. Nadia woke up, and after making a few coughing movements, began to come to her senses. Her blue eyes gradually opened, and reality reigned around her again. Blank, standing behind the gentleman, confidently announced that the doctor would arrive soon, trying to instill some calm into the tense atmosphere and maintain hope for a quick recovery of the master's bride. With ease, the Lord picked up the lady in his arms, holding her carefully, as if she were the most valuable jewel, and headed for the nearest shelter, hoping to provide her with help as quickly as possible. The palace once burned in flames, leaving behind only ruined walls and a trail of sadness, and its majestic architecture was drowned in tongues of flame, personifying the bitter memories of lost greatness. Altair, feeling the fear that the past could repeat itself, carefully carrying his wife in his arms, could not get rid of the disturbing thoughts that fate could deceive them again. The room was furnished modestly and simply with a minimum of furniture, creating an atmosphere of coziness, but leaving a feeling of incompleteness and lack of sophistication. The woman's hand reached out to take off the blanket as it was too hot, but another, as if with tenderness, stopped it, reminding her of the comfort and coziness that warmth brings. This was a lord who was always by his wife's side, closely monitoring her condition and making sure that she always recovered, and felt comfortable radiating care and attention in every gesture, which only strengthened their bond. All red and sweaty Nadia deliriously thought that her husband was very cruel, and this feeling like a shadow enveloped her mind, making her doubt his true intentions and love. The aristocrat carefully covered the girl with a blanket so that she could regain her strength and recover, showing his tenderness and attention to her condition, as if trying to protect the lady from all troubles. Putting his hand to his face, the guy realized that the lady needed to take medicine to return her temperature to normal and quickly restore her health, because the woman's well-being caused him deep concern. The man himself, sitting next to the patient's bed, was lost in his thoughts and suddenly realized that he was probably going crazy, talking to himself as if he was seeking comfort in his own words to cope with his growing anxiety. The hand quickly threw a small round ball into the mouth, which suddenly appeared there, causing both surprise and slight alarm, as if this unexpected act was only a prelude to something more important. The guy kissed the lady, thereby gently injecting her with the medicine, trying to make this moment as gentle and caring as possible to help her recover and feel better. After leaving the sick woman, the man said with relief that she could now sleep peacefully, knowing that his care and attention would help her regain her strength and find peace. Outside the window, the sunset was breaking, painting the sky in vibrant shades of pink and orange, like an artist throwing his boldest and warmest colors onto the canvas, creating an atmosphere of calm and completeness. Altair slowly left the room, carefully closing the door behind him, which created a light sound that filled the space with silence, leaving behind an atmosphere of comfort and care that would be felt in this room for a long time. He ordered the boys on the floor to raise their hands higher, as punishment, forcing them to feel the pressure of the situation and realize the consequences of their actions. The Lord was truly merciless to his subordinates, due to their foolish plan that almost cost him his reputation, and he was not about to forgive such carelessness in his ranks. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, the butler appeared, urgently calling his master, his voice sounding confident, as if he was about to report something extremely important and urgent. Paul began to justify himself to him, stating that he had an annoying guest who had unexpectedly appeared and disturbed his peace, demanding attention and explanations. Drenched in sweat and excitement, the man added that only one person could have appeared without an invitation, and his presence always caused considerable concern and anxiety. Altair reacted with a contemptuous smirk to the mention of Balgael's name, who as always had come to them with the intention of finding out information about what was happening, unable to resist his usual persistence and importunity. A tense silence fell between the boys as they watched the door with concentration and a little trepidation, waiting to see what would happen next. Balgael was a middle-aged man, a relative of the Lord, who missed no opportunity to express his dissatisfaction with the modest interior, burdened with a lack of grace and refinement. Suddenly, the man flinched, realizing that next to him was not only himself, but also another person who seemed to be watching him with wary interest. Altair suddenly appeared before him in a dress uniform, with a stern look and a cold tone, asking what this scoundrel was doing here as if already sensing the guest's ill intentions. Awkwardly looking away, the aristocrat said that his relative's house looked shabby and neglected, just like the owner himself, who seemed to have not changed since the last time they met. Sitting down opposite his guest, the lord, with a slight irritation in his voice, politely but insistently asked him to speak faster, since time was limited, and there was no time for long conversations, since many important matters required his attention. The man was outraged by the impudence of his nephew, who clearly did not show due respect, and his rudeness made him think about how it happened that the family lost the basic values in educations. Altair, with an expressive reproach in his voice, replied that he was the master of this house, and the guest should behave with much more nobility and dignity, showing respect for the position of another. The man's face turned red with embarrassment and indignation, and realizing that he had no reasonable answer to his nephew's reproach, he only fell silent in embarrassment, feeling his pride gradually fading away. Sitting on the sofa and spreading his arms out to the sides, he asked with a slight reproach why his nephew had not invited him to such an important event as a wedding, since it was supposed to be an event related to the royal family. The lord made it clear that he did not consider his relatives to be his real family, and did not want to invite them to the celebration, showing his distance and disinterest. If they were truly related, they wouldn't have tried to disinherit him after the boy lost his parents 10 years ago, showing their true colors and selfishness. The aristocrat, rolling his eyes and coughing slightly, was clearly having difficulty formulating his thoughts, because being in such an awkward situation was not so easy, especially when faced with difficult questions. After all, one of the accomplices was the uncle's father, who sought to take possession of new lands using any means and manipulation to achieve his selfish goals, which only emphasized his greed and lack of principles. When a terrible fire broke out in the palace, the servants rushed in panic to find water, immediately trying to extinguish the fire and save precious property that could be destroyed in the blink of an eye. On that fateful day, the 12-year-old boy lost his parents, and in his heart there remained forever an abyss of bitterness and loneliness, which changed his life and filled it with deep sadness. The little boy couldn't hold back his tears as he watched the blazing fire consume everything around him, symbolizing loss and destruction, leaving the poor thing in chaos. Thus, at such a young age, he became a lord, suddenly finding himself on the throne without the slightest idea of how to manage his responsibilities, without the support of his parents. The relatives, having heard enough of the rumors, began to loudly complain, claiming that the guy was simply obliged to return the money to them as if it were his moral duty, and their discontent grew with each passing minute. They took all the treasures down to the last detail, while making false statements that the guy was obliged to return these riches to them, as if justifying their actions with the right. After the boy came to his senses, he realized with horror that he was left completely without money, and a feeling of deep hopelessness arose in his heart, leaving him in a state of anxiety about the future and how he should live on. And now the uncle came here with the intention of obtaining the title of lord, wanting to take away all the remaining wealth and influence from his nephew, which he, in his opinion, was not worthy of keepings. But the relative deliberately spread rumors during the wedding, claiming that Altair was poor and a eunuch trying to undermine his reputation and create an advantage for himself in the eyes of others. Looking coldly at his nephew, the relative asked if he was going to introduce his bride, as if wanting to embarrass him and emphasize his disdainful attitude. With a smile filled with self-satisfaction, the aristocrat confidently declared that his nephew would never see his bride, and laughing at his attempts, advised him to quickly leave this place as if wanting to get rid of his annoying presence. This statement caused a storm of indignation in the relative who, unable to restrain himself, jumped up from his seat, barely containing his rage and discontent. The hand extended a crimson letter, sealed with a scarlet seal, as if it carried dark secrets and threats ready to be revealed, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation in the air. With a smile on his face, the man explained that the Eastern Union had sent an invitation to an important event that promised to be significant and memorable for all participants. However, this invitation had no meaning for the nobleman, and full of disdain, he squeezed the paper in his hand, as if wishing to destroy all meaning, and, after that, he indifferently threw the letter to the floor, and through clenched teeth gave his relative permission to go to the event, as if not caring about the consequences of his decision. Altair listened with coldness and restraint to the words about how a lord's wife should definitely take part in such events, so as not to remain in the shadows and not miss important opportunities that could give her significance in society. Thoughtfully looking away, the man pondered his uncle's offer to go to a social evening, wanting to cheer up his beloved and perhaps distract her from the sorrows that surrounded them. The guy's plan was to ridicule the couple at the event, intending to embarrass them in front of everyone, which he believed would give him satisfaction and restore his own dignity. Before leaving, the aristocrat added that they would also be able to see the third prince at this event, which was a rare opportunity that should not be missed. Nadia's eyes widened as a bright light filled the room, as if awakening her from a long and deep sleep, and making her realize that she was back in reality where everything around her had changed. The lady was already waiting for Anna, who was worried about her hostess's health, trying to support and ease her return to normal life after everything that had happened. It turned out that the girl had been in bed for a long time, rubbing her eyes and realizing that Nadia was in shock at how long she had been in bed due to the illness that had delayed her recovery so much. The maid began to complain that she was in despair when her mistress suddenly threw herself into the water, and she was very afraid for her lady's life, since the maid did not know what was happening or how to help. The maid, with tears in her eyes, began to cry, claiming that the life of her mistress was several times more important than her own servant, and her anxiety only increased with each passing moment. With a gentle smile, Nadia admitted that Anna means a lot to her, and if the situation repeats itself, she will again jump into the water without hesitation to save her, despite all the dangers. This meant a great deal to the maid. She took the lady's hands in her hands with a passionate feeling and swore to always remain by the aristocrat's side, ready to support the beauty in any trials and difficulties that might arise along the way. Afterwards, Anna confessed that it was all part of a plan she had developed with others to help the mistress and master fall in love with each other, pushing them towards intimacy and mutual understanding. Nadia remembered that it was Altair who saved her from the water, preventing her from drowning, and her heart was filled with gratitude to him for not leaving his beautiful wife in trouble. After that, she inquired about her husband's health, because the water was cold, and she was worried that he might also get sick, considering how much he was worried about her at that moment. The maid began to convince her that the Lord had never been ill and had always been in good health, emphasizing his resilience in order to dispel her worries and restore confidence that he could cope with any difficulties. Raising her finger up, the maiden confidently declared that the man had never caught any infection, emphasizing his good health and invulnerability to illness. Nadia finally emerged from her chambers, feeling relieved by the thought that her fiancé had never been ill, and this gave her confidence in his health and strength. She worried that he was simply pretending to be healthy so as not to lose the respect of others, and this thought tormented her, instilling fear that beneath the mask of confidence there might be real vulnerability. Suddenly, a shrill voice abruptly stopped the noblewoman, forcing her to turn around and pay attention to the man who had spoken words full of confidence and insistence. It was Cain and Blank, who were still kneeling, their hands raised up, expressing their submissive respect and devotion, as if waiting for permission or recognition from the mistress. They wept with joy, realizing that the lady was well, and between tears of laughter promised each other never again to allow such excitement so as not to cause her unnecessary worries. Confused, she stretched out her hands and admitted that it was her own fault for jumping into the water, as if wanting to take responsibility for her actions and experiences. Suddenly, the aristocrat staggered, feeling dizzy, and the world began to seem unstable, like waves that were trying to cover her again. She felt incredibly pleased when her subordinates began to speak about her with respect and admiration, emphasizing her virtues and merits, which filled her heart with pride and joy, making her feel significant and appreciated in the eyes of others. In her home, she was treated rudely and curtly, as if her opinions and feelings did not matter, which left her feeling resentful and lonely. In her husband's house, on the contrary, everyone treated her with warmth and kindness, surrounding her with care and attention, which created an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility, relieving her of the worries and experiences that tormented her in her home. Nadia promised the guy that she had simply been lying in bed for too long, and with a slight smile promised that she would soon return to her normal life, full of energy and a desire to move forward. However, this did not calm the servants, who continued to worry about their mistress, worrying about her condition, and wanting her to remain safe, despite the fact that the beauty got out of bed. The girl tried to explain that she was not weak, and that it was quite normal for girls to have mild anemia, trying to dispel the concerns of those around her, and convince them that she was feeling well. However, the knights, without listening to the explanations, decided that it would be better to call a doctor, believing that professional help was necessary to ensure health and safety. Red with embarrassment, the lady raised her hands and shouted that she was perfectly fine, trying to convince everyone around her of her resilience and lack of health problems. Altair suddenly appeared, asking with slight concern what all the commotion was about in the hallway. His voice was confident, but his eyes showed a sincere desire to understand what was happening and protect those dear to him. Looking sternly at his wife, he reminded her that he had not given her permission to leave his chambers, emphasizing the need to be careful and stay safe, despite her desire to explore the world around her. The noblewoman, whispering under her breath about her concern for the health of the Lord himself, decided that the time had come to find out about his well-being and express her sincere concern. An awkward silence fell, and it seemed as if all words had left the nobleman, leaving the grown boy to stare silently into space, as if searching for lost thoughts. But suddenly he turned away, blushing, as if he were flushed, and trying to hide his embarrassment, muttered that there was no need to worry about such trifles, since the aristocrat had never been ill before. Nadia looked down, feeling a quiet relief and joy that the man remained unharmed because of her mistakes, and this moment filled the lady's heart with warmth, as if the burden of guilt began to slowly go away. The couple stood in front of each other in comfortable silence, not needing words. Their looks said more than any phrases could, filling the moment with calm and tender closeness. The girl carefully clarified that she wanted only one thing: to return back to her room, and now, with a quiet plea in her voice, she asked to allow her to do this in order to restore her strength in solitude. However, she was stopped by the stern voice of her husband, who, not allowing the lovely lady to take a step further, picked her up in his arms, showing with his determination that he would not allow her to leave alone until she had fully recovered. The girl felt uneasy when the lady was suddenly lifted up and carried back to her chambers without giving her the opportunity to understand what was happening and what events lay ahead. As a result, Nadia was lying in bed, and the former mercenary calmly settled down, sat next to her on a chair, carefully watching her and waiting for her to finally come to her senses. As a caring friend, the man asked about affairs in the capital, and this unexpected remark puzzled the beauty, forcing the beauty to think about what secrets and intrigues could be hidden behind his sincere interest in her life and current events. The guy quickly explained that he was asking about what the bride did in her free time, and that the interest was sincere and not caused by any suspicion or mistrust. Nadia, with a forced smile on her face, replied that she used to spend her time reading fascinating books and taking leisurely walks through picturesque places, trying to hide the restless thoughts that tormented her at that moment. What she didn't mention, however, was that she avoided family gatherings because of her shyness, feeling that insecurity and fear prevented her from opening up and interacting with others. Frustrated, the girl hung her head, unable to admit to the strong lord her weakness and fear that such a refusal could push him away and destroy what was left between the two of them. As a friend, the man handed her a scarlet envelope in the fingers of his white glove, giving this moment special significance and excitement. It was clear that the contents of the envelope contained an important message. The amazed lady looked closely at the invitation to the hunting season that was addressed to them from the Eastern Union, and a thrill of anticipation of the upcoming event crept into her large heart. Nadia's mouth dropped open in horror at the thought of the upcoming meeting, with so many people staring in shock at the paper in her hands, also trying to comprehend what awaited her and how it would affect her future plans and feelings. She felt asthenic, as if she stood out from the crowd like a ghost, left aside from the general flow of life. Her fragile state reflected her inner anxieties, giving each step a special significance and weight. Perhaps Altair expected that with her exquisite fan and charming smile, She would easily communicate with members of high society, making new connections and expanding her circle of acquaintances. It was a good idea to start with the hunting season, where the bow and arrow became the main attributes filling the atmosphere with the anticipation of adventure and the excitement associated with the catch. The lady swallowed hard, feeling a cold fear creep into her soul, because deep in her heart, she was afraid that blood might be spilled at this event, darkening the atmosphere of sophistication and celebration. The problem was that she was constantly afraid of blood, and it was for this reason that she lost consciousness at her own wedding. This tragic moment, instead of becoming the embodiment of happiness and love, turned into a real nightmare. Trying not to disappoint her husband, she slowly said that she could not let him down. Sitting in bed, she fell into deep thought about the importance of supporting each other in difficult times and keeping promises. At this, the guy folded his arms across his chest and, looking at her confidently, said that she didn't need to pretend or try too hard, it was enough to just be herself. The lady froze in place when she heard that the third prince would also be at the upcoming event. Excitement overwhelmed her, and her heart beat faster from curiosity and anticipation, because the thought of meeting such an important guest filled her with dread. But in the novella, the royal person turned out to be a traitor, a sinister villain with a sly smile and blonde hair that sparkled in the sun like a symbol of insidious intentions. His name was Orca Lupus, and he was determined to obtain the Golden Throne, dreaming of the power and wealth that would come with it. Every step towards his goal was important to him, and he was not going to stop until he achieved his majestic goal. The prince kept the secret that while feigning illness, he used the opportunity to travel freely around the country, gathering potential allies. Each new acquaintance became an important part of his plan. Altair was one of the heir to the throne's faithful dogs, a devoted defender. His fighting skills made him indispensable in the retinue, and his eyes, full of determination, spoke of his readiness to fight for the honor of his master at any moment. He became the third prince's true sword, carrying out all of his orders with impeccable loyalty and precision. His actions were dictated by a deep sense of duty, and he left no room for doubt, realizing that his efforts could change the fate of the kingdom. One of the orders was to cut off the head of a lady with pink hair that resembled cotton candy. And this cruel task became a true test of both strength and morality for him, forcing him to consider the consequences of his actions. The lady learned that the gathering was to begin in 2 months, and she had time to carefully prepare for this important event, thinking over every detail in order to make the best impression. Soon a meeting was to take place between the main villains of history, which could change the fate of the country, outlining new plans and intrigues that could lead to catastrophic consequences. Nadia felt goosebumps on her skin as bad thoughts began to fill her mind, creating an uneasy feeling as if something terrible was about to happen. The Lord watched his fragile wife, feeling a shiver run through his entire body from anxiety, because he understood that such vulnerability required protection and support at this difficult moment. He handed her a handkerchief, trying to calm her down, and this caring gesture reminded her that there was always room in his heart for tenderness and support in difficult times. After that, he carefully covered her with a soft sheet, creating coziness and warmth, and quietly told her to relax and rest, reminding her that at such moments, care and peace are the most important for restoring strength and peace of mind. However, the girl could not get rid of thoughts about the two villains of the novel. Their insidious plans and intrigues constantly swirled in her head, causing a growing feeling of anxiety and concern about the future, which could be in jeopardy. As she lay in bed, she hoped that there was a hidden plot in the novel that had not yet been revealed, and the anticipation of unexpected turns of events ahead filled her heart with curiosity and excitement. Suddenly, a hand touched the lady's forehead, and she heard a quiet voice that ordered her to stop thinking about all sorts of nonsense, reminding her that sometimes it is better to leave worries behind and focus on the present. It was the husband who reassured his wife, saying that there were still 2 months left before the meeting, and they had enough time to prepare to think through everything and organize it in the best possible way. Covering his companion's eyes with his hand, he gently ordered her to go to bed, giving her a feeling of calm and protection, as if he wanted to shelter his beloved girl from the worries and cares of the world around her. Nadia couldn't believe that such a caring person, who was always there for her family, could be a villain, and this thought tormented her, making her doubt the true intentions of the people around her. The next day, the weather in the castle was beautiful. The sun's rays illuminated the walls, and a light breeze brought with it the aromas of blooming gardens, creating an atmosphere of peace and hope. Nadia stood in the hallway, in a new dress that emphasized her beauty, holding a basket filled with treats, preparing for a meeting that the beauty hoped would be the beginning of something wonderful. It was strange that the Lord decided to unite with the third prince in this story, because such alliances often hide deeper plans and intrigues that can radically change the fate of the kingdom and its inhabitants. The girl went over various reasons in her head and finally settled on the idea that if they found a crystal mine, they would become incredibly rich, which would open up new opportunities for them and make them powerful in the eyes of everyone. The novel also mentioned that Orca was an incredibly handsome man, but his inner nature hid a terrible monster whose dark desires and insidious plans contradicted his attractive appearance. Nadia did not know how to openly tell her husband about the true nature of the heir to the throne and point out his nature without raising unnecessary fuss and creating unnecessary suspicions. Nadia did not know how to delicately inform her husband about the true nature of the heir to the throne and point out his true nature, trying to avoid unnecessary fuss and not arouse suspicion so as not to complicate the situation. Initially, she thought to ask her husband for permission to go in search of wealth, hoping that this would allow her not only to strengthen their financial position, but also to demonstrate her independence and determination in achieving her goals. But she soon changed her mind, realizing that in such a case, a man's honor could suffer, and he would certainly be upset because it was important for him to feel his strength and the protection of his family. Therefore, the lady decided to act independently and in secret, relying only on her own strength to achieve her goals and keep everything a secret from others. In the spacious training hall, knights dressed in shining armor swung their swords with passion and intensity, honing their skills and techniques, creating an atmosphere of fighting spirit and strong brotherhood around them. Blank, tiredly wiping the sweat from his face, was happy to realize that his morning workout had given him not only physical exercise, but also a boost of energy, strengthening his spirit and body. Suddenly, the guy's attention was drawn to a sweet girl who, with a sincere smile and a warm voice, wished everyone around her a good morning, filling the atmosphere around with light and joy, like the dawn that illuminates the world with its radiance. The other men also looked up from their workout when they heard their friend passing by and began exchanging jokes and funny remarks, forgetting for a moment about the seriousness of their trainings. And so, Nadia found herself in the center of attention of everyone present. Her confidence and charisma attracted glances, like a magnet forcing those around her to forget about training and focus on her. Clumsily holding out a basket of delicious sandwiches, she said with genuine concern that she had come to feed the knights about whom she was so worried and who were dear to her. The sandwiches, prepared with love, were truly good and gave off a pleasant aroma, filling the air with delicious notes that awakened the appetite and created an atmosphere of coziness. During the cooking process, the aristocrat was supported by an experienced chef who generously shared his secrets of culinary art, enriching each dish with unique flavors and giving it sophistication. The men, like hungry lions, literally pounced on the treat, expressing their sincere gratitude to the noblewoman for her generosity and care, which warmed their hearts and filled their souls with joy. Cain bowed to his lady with sincere gratitude, expressing his deep appreciation for the kindness she had shown him, warming his soul with the warmth and attention so valuable and important at that moment. The guys, enjoying delicious food, cheerfully discussed how much each of them had eaten, laughing and teasing each other, creating a relaxed atmosphere of friendship and joy, where every word sounded like a kind, playful compliment. This made the aristocrat first smile and then laugh merrily, filling the space around with sincere laughter. The lady could no longer contain her happiness. The amazed knights who had gathered for the feast were so surprised that they could not contain their emotions. One of them, trying to react to what was happening, was so shocked that he dropped the food from his hands, and this only increased the joy around. Even though the sandwich was lying on the floor, many still expressed a desire to eat it sincerely, hoping that it would still be tasty despite its dubious location. The hand, overcoming internal doubts, carefully reached out to pick up the food from the floor, hoping that it would still retain its taste and aroma, despite the unfavorable conditions. Despite the lady's objections, the grown man, ignoring all doubts, picked up his food from the floor and began to chew confidently, declaring that it tasted quite good and delicious. With a gentle smile, Blank confidently explained that during their difficult missions, they had often encountered much less appetizing food, which made the current dish more than acceptable and even tasty in the eyes of everyone present. This greatly upset the lady, who felt that the guards should be more demanding about food, especially after they had been on difficult expeditions where their endurance and dedication had been severely tested. The knights of the capital, dressed in rich clothes and armor, proudly displayed their nobility and status, while radiating confidence and strength that attracted the attention of those around them. During this time, the guards on the front lines courageously defended the country from enemies, risking their lives in terrible conditions, full of dangers and difficulties, but remaining devoted to their duty and homeland. With determination in her voice, Nadia announced that she had come to this place to ask those present for a favor, sincerely hoping for their support and understanding, because it was extremely important to her. The men, frozen in motion with food in their hands, seemed to be immersed in an atmosphere of anticipation, permeated with excitement, as if they were preparing to witness something truly amazing and unusual. Kane, holding back his displeasure, tactfully hinted to the lady that her words about the request were inappropriate and did not correspond to the situation in which they found themselves. He then added that asking for any favor was not particularly appropriate either, as she could easily have simply given them an order based on her position and authority in the situation. After all, Nadia proudly bore the title of the Lord's wife, realizing the importance and prestige of her role in society, which gave her a special grandeur and self-confidence, allowing her to shine among others. Lowering her head in embarrassment, the lady felt her heart fill with warmth from the fact that everyone around her treated her with sincere respect, and this gave her confidence in her own strength and importance in society. Kane nudged his friend slightly, saying with a slight grin that it was now his turn to speak, especially if the lady was going to ask them something important that required their attention and participation. Blank confidently confirmed the words of his friend, adding that they were fully prepared to fulfill any order of the mistress, thus showing their devotion and readiness to support her in any endeavors, whatever they may be. Under the angry looks of his comrades, the guy tried to justify himself, explaining that he actually only meant his readiness to carry out all the lady's instructions and had absolutely no intention of offending them or causing discontent. Nadia froze in bewilderment because before she had never given orders to other people and had never experienced such a feeling of power, which made her heart tremble with unexpected excitement and responsibility. However, in this castle, the girl was determined to do her best for the knights, realizing that their well-being and success depended largely on their own efforts and willingness to show leadership in difficult times. Therefore, without thinking for long, the beauty clenched her hands into fists and, with a slight expression of concern on her face, said that something valuable was stored in the depths of the mountain range, capable of changing the fate of the entire kingdom and bringing great wealth. The men stared at their hostess in shock as she said that no one should be told about this, not even her husband, and the air was filled with tension from the ambiguity of the woman's words and the secrets she was hiding. Blank, full of doubt and bewilderment, cautiously asked what the true purpose of such a secret was, and why the hostess decided to make such a request, leaving them in a state of confusion and anxiety due to incomplete information. With a smirk on her face, Nadia explained that she was talking about a mine, in the depths of which magical stones were hidden, capable of giving the owner amazing powers and unusual abilities. The shelves in the library were groaning under the weight of many books, neatly arranged on the shelves, as if they contained entire worlds of knowledge and fascinating stories ready to reveal themselves to anyone who decided to delve into their pages. Blank could not believe the information that the lady had given him, that the mine with magic stones was right under their noses, hidden from view, and ready to reveal its secrets only to those who dared to explore it. The mountains, however, were full of dangers hiding in their depths, terrible monsters and trolls who were waiting for their victims, ready at any moment to attack those who dared to approach their possessions. Suddenly, Blank jumped as he heard someone calling his name for a long time, and the shrill sound of his voice made his heart beat faster, awakening a mixture of surprise and alarm in him. Altair asked his subordinate, with curiosity and slight concern, why he had decided to come here, wondering what could have prompted him to make this decision and what important news he was going to report. The man tried to begin to talk about the mind stammering, but suddenly froze, realizing that the wrong words could reveal too many secrets that were better left secret, causing him to fear the possible consequences. The noblewoman urged the knights to keep her secret a strict secret and not tell anyone about it, including even the lord of their house, realizing that disclosing this information could have serious consequences. The man froze in place, deep in thought about what he should do, whether he should reveal this information to the lady, or whether it was better to keep everything a secret, realizing that his decision could affect the fate of many. Realizing that her subordinate was not going to reveal his thoughts, the aristocrat decided to take the initiative into her own hands and start a conversation, first saying that she would soon go hunting for a dragon, hoping to thereby develop the conversation and learn more. The frightened boy tried to convince the gentleman, claiming that it was not worth it, but he was determined and insisted on a high reward for defeating the monster, not wanting to give up his goal. Dragons were terrifying creatures that wreaked havoc and destruction upon the world, leaving behind only ashes and fear in the hearts of those who dared to resist their might and power, capable of crushing even the bravest warriors. The aristocrat agreed with these words and added that this was precisely why she decided to set out on her journey alone, so as not to put anyone in an awkward position and avoid unnecessary troubles. Taking the paper in hand, Altair explained that Cain and Blank were supposed to protect their territories during the Lord's absence, ensuring security and order in his absence, so that no one could take advantage of this vulnerability. The knight insistently told the boy not to talk nonsense, because he could not go hunting for the monster alone, where dangers lurked at every step. Looking coldly at his subordinate, the nobleman asked why he had disobeyed the commander's orders, his voice sounding stern and demanding, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and the need to maintain subordination. Altair nodded his head in understanding and explained that they simply had to play along with the humans one last time, as they had promised to pay handsomely for this cooperation, and such a deal could be beneficial to all parties. And then the guy had a great idea. He suggested to the Lord to postpone the request for the dragon for a while, confident that this decision would allow them to better prepare for the upcoming threat and avoid unnecessary risks. The words that the lady personally prepared sandwiches for everyone present made the nobleman angry, causing a storm of emotions since he considered this humiliating for his status and position in society. Frightened by the nobleman's powerful aura, Blank wanted to take back his words, realizing that the consequences of his statements could be fatal, and not wanting to risk his life in this team. The man was not going to remain silent, and told the gentleman that Nadia had recently discovered some really useful information about a hidden gem mine in the mountains that could be incredibly valuable to their business. After this, Blank added in front of the aristocrat that the lady also planned to explore the mountain, as she believed that not only precious stones could be hidden there, but also many other mysteries worth solving. Altair expressed his opinion that before making any decisions, they should conduct a thorough investigation and find out who knows what about the mountains and hidden treasures in order to avoid mistakes and prepare for possible dangers. Blank was upset to learn that the terrible gentleman did not refuse the task of the dragon, and decided to take on this difficult order, realizing what dangers could await them ahead. Looking sternly at his interlocutor, the nobleman explained that the precious stones could indeed be found in the mountains, but there were no guarantees of this, and hoping for luck was extremely unreasonable. Moreover, he had already sent a letter to the customers, and this decision had become irreversible, leaving them little time to prepare. Now they had to act regardless of all the risks that could arise during this dangerous adventure. Unable to contradict his master, the knight agreed with the decision, although inside he was thinking about how he could leave this stupid lord aside in order to avoid unnecessary trouble and save his reputation. A deep silence reigned in the room, while the hosts dined peacefully in the presence of the servants, each of whom tried not to attract unnecessary attention to themselves immersed in their own thoughts about the affairs and concerns that awaited them after the meal. Nadia hesitated, wondering how best to tell her husband about something important that was bothering her and demanding his attention, fearing how the man opposite would perceive this information. Altair asked his wife what was wrong, his voice sounding genuinely concerned, and he looked at her carefully, trying to figure out what could have upset or worried the beauty. The Virgin confidently stated that the food was incredibly delicious and made her happy, after which she added that she had a request for her husband, hoping that he would listen with due attention and understanding, given the importance of what the Virgin was about to say. Surprised, the Lord asked what exactly the lady wanted, his gaze full of sincere interest and expectation. The nobleman understood that the request could be important and significant for both, and was ready to listen attentively. Nadia said that she had an order for a scary and powerful dragon, but she believed that it was too dangerous to risk her life and well-being, and needed good advice and support from friends. The sincerely beautiful noblewoman suggested canceling the order to avoid certain death, because she understood that such a risky mission could have serious consequences for all participants. Amazed by what was happening, the Lord, with a slight smile on his face, asked his bride to repeat what she had said while sitting at the table to make sure that he had heard everything correctly. After these words, the man slowly turned to the butler. His gaze was serious and focused, and in a restrained tone, he asked him to refrain from rash and hasty actions in order to avoid unwanted consequences and maintain order in the house. The lady was in deep shock when she realized that the young man was already aware of all the details and knew more about the situation than the noblewoman could have imagined. At that moment, the attendant asked the lady to consider the possibility of investing her personal funds in a very promising project, which, according to him, promised significant profits. The girl's jewelry belonged exclusively to her, and in no way were part of her husband's property, which emphasized her independence and the right to dispose of them at her own discretion. So Nadia hesitated for a moment, thinking, and then gently refused the butler, explaining that she already had a place where she planned to invest her money, and this decision was final. Suddenly, Paul announced with a serious face that the gentleman was soon going to go hunting for a dragon, which caused a storm of indignation and anxiety in the girl, since such risky adventures seemed absolutely reckless to hers. The houseworker bowed politely and respectfully and asked the lady to try to convince her husband not to take the risk and not to go on a dangerous adventure in order to avoid tragic consequences. Altair noted with a slight smile that a wife does not have to blindly follow the butler's instructions, because she has her own opinion and the right to make decisions based on personal beliefs and feelings, which should be taken into account in any situation. Nadia looked away and quietly muttered that she was also worried about the aristocrat, realizing how such risky actions could lead to undesirable consequences. The girl remembered how the man had saved her at a critical moment, preventing her from drowning, and this realization once again confirmed that the Lord was indeed a good man capable of noble deeds. Sitting across from her husband at the table, the lady confidently added that she was also part of his family and had every right to express her opinion, which should be taken into account in their joint affairs. Suddenly, the nobleman rose from the table, approached the bride, extended his hand to her, and asked with genuine interest if she had finished eating, showing the hope that they could continue their conversation in a more relaxed atmosphere. After that, they headed together towards the ladies' quarters, walking along the corridor and enjoying the light conversation that filled the atmosphere with ease and warmth. Altair opened the door for his wife with genuine respect and nobility, allowing her to pass first, which emphasized his concern for her and demonstrated the politeness that was always present in their relationship. After that, the guy, acting suddenly and decisively, pressed the beauty against the wall, leaving her no room to maneuver, and their eyes met, creating an atmosphere of tension and sensuality around them, as if time had stopped. The man calmly explained that she should not worry about him, because circumstances had indeed changed, but he was confident that he could adapt to the new conditions and ensure safety and comfort. The lady felt alarmed when her companion, noticing the woman's anxiety, suggested that she was worried about the possibility of becoming a widow, which suddenly made the beauty think about the consequences of his risky decisions. Leaning closer to the girl, Altair, with a warm smile, asked her not to worry and to behave like a real wife, thereby emphasizing his support and desire to create trust between them. After this, the nobleman walked away, leaving the beauty in complete bewilderment, and her thoughts rushed between surprise and curiosity, trying to understand the true meaning of the words and unexpected actions that suddenly changed the atmosphere of their communication. He gently adjusted the pink hair, moving it away from her face to free up her features and allow the rays of light to softly touch her delicate skin, adding a special warmth and intimacy to the moment. Altair looked at the beauty with a sweet smile and asked what she would like him to call her, giving this moment a slight playfulness and closeness between them. A memory came to mind of Nadia discussing this issue with her fiancé during their first meetings. It was especially touching as they opened up to each other about their feelings and dreams for the future. The man expressed his hope that when she returned, the aristocrat would find the answer to this important question. The words sounded with sincere expectation, full of faith in the future, and hope for the resolution of a long-standing riddle. After this, the Lord gently placed his hand on his companion's head, and smiling called her a good wife, which added a note of warmth and closeness to the atmosphere of their conversation. Altair remained true to his intentions, and without hesitation left the majestic castle full of determination, and determined to set out on a dangerous journey in search of the dragon, hoping to find it and receive a reward. While the maid combed her mistress's hair, she quietly read books on the manners of a true lady, trying to absorb every detail in order to become the ideal assistant. Anna felt a little embarrassed when the hostess, with a kind smile, called her by name, and at that moment she felt how warmth enveloped her cheeks, giving special significance to this unexpected attention. The maid listened attentively to the question of the lady who was interested in how she as a wife should choose her husband correctly, trying to understand what qualities and virtues are really important for a harmonious relationship. Nadia fondly recalled how the Lord had recently approached her with a request to support him as a true wife, relying on loyalty and care, so that together they could overcome all the difficulties that they would have to endure. Anna suggested that perhaps he was referring to an Eastern custom in which a wife would often make a bracelet for her husband to serve as protection and bring good luck to the wearer, thereby strengthening their bond and trust. The bracelets had to be identical, symbolizing unity and harmony in the relationship, emphasizing mutual devotion and support between the spouses. With a smile, the maid noted that if the jewelry remained whole and undamaged, it indicated that everything was fine, with the owners inspiring hope for strong and harmonious relationships in their family, full of love and trust. Without thinking twice, the maid walked away from her mistress and said that she would soon prepare all the necessary materials for weaving a bracelet to create something special that would symbolize the strong bond between the spouses. 3 days passed, and the palace stood in silence, as if frozen in anticipation, enveloped in an atmosphere of calm, where each room held secrets and memories ready to be revealed soon. Nadia walked in the darkness with a lamp in her hands, feeling that her husband would soon have to leave. The lady's heart was filled with a feeling of anxiety and uncertainty because every step in the night brought her closer to an unknown future. Altair, standing next to his horse, sheltered in the incessant rain, with his things carefully collected, prepared for the upcoming journey full of unexpected adventures. With an emotionless expression on his face, the Lord reminded that he should not be seen off emphasizing his independence and strict manners, which always commanded respect. Nadia remembered all their past meetings very well, but now looking at him on the street, she understood that she would not be able to avoid the last meeting, which would become an important milestone in their common history. The man was amazed that despite all the difficulties, she wanted to show concern, as if today had become an occasion for her to make this gesture, filling the atmosphere with warmth and tenderness. Slightly embarrassed, the aristocrat added hesitantly that there were too many prying eyes in this place who might notice their conversation and misinterpret the situation. The aristocrat, with a slight tremor in her hand and determination in her eyes, grabbed her husband's hand, handing him the bracelet. Not just a piece of jewelry, but a symbol of their deep trust and unbreakable bond. Compared to the women's, the men's hands seemed much more massive and powerful, emphasizing the contrast between their size and strength, which gave the moment special significance. Carefully holding back a slight excitement, the aristocrat placed a thin thread with elegant beads on her husband's hand, symbolizing the trust and affection that intertwined their destinies. With a soft, sincere smile on her face, Nadia tenderly explained that she had lovingly prepared a wish bracelet especially for him, which would now protect and guard him according to the ancient customs of the East. Blank approached the pair of lovers with a sly grin, and casting a fleeting glance at their exchange of gifts, remarked in a mocking tone that the husband seemed to expect something much more impressive from his lady than this modest bracelet. The foot suddenly touched the other person's knee, causing awkwardness and interrupting the conversation, as if creating an insurmountable barrier in their conversation, which made both of them freeze for a moment, and tension hung in the air. Suddenly, Nadia shuddered, hearing a question from the guy, who with a slight mockery asked where the woman's bracelet was then, because they should always be paired, thus creating a complete image. The noblewoman hesitantly extended her hand, which was adorned with the same thread, as if to symbolize their unity and connection, which was a special moment in their relationship. Their hands gently joined, and the man carefully adjusted the jewelry on her wrist, giving this moment a special warmth and trepidation, as if he wanted to capture it in his memories forever, so that this moment would become a symbol of their love. Altair couldn't help but notice how thin and fragile the lady's wrists were, as if they were made to gently wrap around his hand, adding a touch of sophistication and refinement to their meeting. The girl asked the nobleman, with slight anxiety, to be careful on the way, because every adventure is fraught with unpredictable dangers, and she could not help but worry about his safety. She watched with sadness as he drove away, his lonely figure gradually disappearing into the distance, leaving a feeling of emptiness and tender regret in her heart that their paths were diverging. Some time passed after the departure of the lord, and the knights of the palace began to explore the mountain range, seeking to uncover its secrets and find possible paths that could lead to new adventures and treasures. However, despite all their efforts, nothing was found in the mountains, and the knights, disappointed and tired, decided to return back. Realizing that sometimes searching can only lead to disappointment, the men began to tire from the long search, standing in the forest and clutching their heads in despair, realizing that their efforts could be in vain and time was passing without result. Blank, bowing with deep respect, politely addressed the noblewoman in the office, informing her that unfortunately no results had been achieved in their search today, which of course caused him palpable annoyance and concern for further efforts. With a smile on her face, the girl sincerely thanked them for all their efforts, adding that they would make another attempt tomorrow, hoping for more successful results in their search. The door quietly slamming behind the knight left a light trace of tension in the air, and he, feeling the gaze of those around him, stepped into the unknown, plunging into the world of his thoughts and hopes. The charming aristocrat could not help but notice that Blank began to show distrust towards the female idea, because the lack of any results in the search only strengthened the doubts that had arisen. However, Nadia was confident in her actions because she had read this book about 50 times, and her confidence in her knowledge and beliefs left no room for doubt, which allowed her to boldly defend her point of view in the face of any objections. But soon, the little girl herself began to feel uneasy, walking around the house with her proud posture, and this feeling grew like a shadow, following her around every corner, reminding her of unresolved issues and uncertainty. Suddenly, Nadia stopped, hearing a loud crack that came from behind her, causing alarm and making her heart beat faster, as if sensing the approaching danger. It was Blank, who was rushing towards the aristocrat with good news. He had finally managed to discover the magic stones that could significantly change their fate and give hope for success in their endeavors. The aristocrat covered her face with her hands, in happiness, not believing her ears, unable to comprehend that all her dreams were beginning to come true, and hope for a bright future was flaring up in her soul. They immediately began discussing a project to develop mines to explore deep into the mountains, to extract minerals that could bring significant benefits and open up new opportunities for their kingdom. Magic stones were a valuable material with amazing properties that could significantly improve the quality of life in the kingdom and open up new horizons for magical research. Awkwardly placing his hand on the knight's neck, he admitted with slight embarrassment that the lady had always had a significant influence on his decisions, and this sometimes made him think about his own feelings and intentions. Nadia stood in the company of people who praised the lady's intelligence and felt happy because the guards no longer had to fight monsters that threatened their peace. She waited with hope for Altir's return, imagining how he, upon seeing her, would admiringly praise his beloved wife for all the efforts that the lovely maiden had put into their life together. Suddenly, as if time stood still, the bracelet on the lady's hand cracked, and the gems scattered like stars falling from the sky, leaving a magical glow and a moment of wonder around. It fell quietly onto the grass, shattering into a multitude of sparkling fragments that, like drops of dew, shimmered in the sun, creating a magical dance of light around it. This meant that something terrible had happened to the Lord, as if dark clouds were hanging over his fate, foreshadowing the troubles and misfortunes that had already begun to envelop his life. Nadia awkwardly hesitated in front of her subordinates, trying to assure them that it was just an accident, although inside she was tormented by doubts and worries about how the workers would take the words about the master's wounds. The ladies' hands tightly clutched the thread in excitement for their beloved, and each of their taut knots reflected anxiety and uncertainty, as if they were tied by an invisible thread that held hopes and fears. How suddenly the lady froze and heard a strange voice coming from the nearby bushes. The noblewoman instantly turned towards the sound, listening warily, feeling a chill of curiosity run down her spine. This was an aristocrat who had brazenly barged into a lord's domain and demanded something with defiant self-confidence, as if he did not realize that he was violating boundaries that he should not have crossed. Nadia realized that this man was a count of the nearby lands, and her heart beat faster, realizing that his high status gave his demands a special weight and influence that she so feared. The nobleman said irritably that despite everything he intended to meet the Baroness, and insisted that no one should stand in his way, as if his words were an unshakable order that did not tolerate objections. Nadia realized that she was the only one who could resolve the situation that had arisen, and decided to intervene, determined to find a way out and prevent the conflict from escalating to unpredictable consequences. The man loudly stated that since the lord had left his estate, the noblewoman had to receive the guests in accordance with her husband's duty, emphasizing the importance of her role in society and expecting her to fulfill her duties. Finally, the beauty intervened in the conversation, confidently introducing herself as the mistress of this house, and her beautiful voice sounded with dignity, and her gaze expressed determination, ready to defend her rights and protect her territory. The aristocrat immediately began to be indignant, claiming that the lady had no manners, while she herself showed a keen interest in the reasons for the count's arrival, clearly not paying attention to her displeasure. The square was lined with soldiers ready to perform their duties, creating an atmosphere of tension and determination. The nobleman angrily shouted that the guards of the maiden's husband had brazenly invaded his territory, and this behavior was completely unacceptable, causing not only indignation, but also alarm among those present who understood the seriousness of the situation. Blank hastened to warn the man, declaring that these possessions belonged to them, thereby emphasizing his rights, and insistently demanding respect for the established boundaries. In response, they were handed a map showing two territories clearly marked and separated, which clearly illustrated the ongoing disputes over ownership. The knight stuttered that the map had been damaged, and after that, the lord was given the mountain range as a gift for exterminating the dubious creatures, which caused him discontent and confusion. The aristocrat clearly knew about this, and now wanted to get his lands back, demanding monetary compensation for it, confidently insisting on his rights and showing that he was not going to put up with injustice. Blank was deeply outraged by such impudence, and unable to contain his emotions, resolutely rebelled against this injustice, believing that he should not stand aside when someone tries to violate his rights and interests. The nobleman quickly got tired of this, and realized that talking to stupid knights was absolutely useless, since their stubbornness only added fuel to the fire and interfered with constructive dialogue. Nadia flinched as she was addressed and ordered to sign the papers, feeling the excitement and anxiety building inside her at the unexpected turn of events. The lady was in no hurry to obey the stranger's instructions, not being prepared to give up her husband's lands, which she considered her rightful property, and was determined to defend her rights. Loudly and coldly, Nadia refused to sign the papers, resolutely refusing to let her husband down and defending his interests at this tense moment. The nobleman was shocked and could not believe that a noble girl with high manners and reputation was exhibiting such inappropriate behavior, which only increased his displeasure and surprise. A tense conflict arose between the count and the aristocrat, exacerbated by disagreements over property and land rights, which led to an exchange of harsh words and discontent on both sides. He even grabbed the Baroness by the hand, furiously shouting for her to immediately sign the contract, demonstrating his intolerance and desperation in this tense situation. Suddenly, a man's hand grabbed the other's hand, interrupting their tense argument and drawing the attention of those around them, adding even more drama to the already tense atmosphere of discontent and contradiction. It was Altair, who had finally returned from his long journey and was now full of anger at the rude treatment his wife had received, which could not help but make him want to intervene and protect the lady's honor. He explained to his wife that he was very glad to see her back, and then the lord added that it was extremely rude of the earl to come here and interfere in their affairs, especially considering what had happened. The aristocrat was frightened by the rage and pressure from the main villain of the novel. Feeling fear take hold of him, and unable to resist, he stepped aside, trying to avoid conflict. Turning to his subordinate, the man began to ask why the lord had returned so early, since he should have been in a state of recovery from an injury, and this unexpected news worried him. Drawing his sword from its sheath, Altair regarded the nobleman's behavior as a declaration of war, causing him to turn around abruptly and collide with the butler standing behind him. Coldly and with obvious bloodthirstiness, the aristocrat added that killing the intruder would almost be an act of self-defense, thus emphasizing his determination to defend his lands and rights, even if it required brutal measures. The count fell to his knees and, full of confusion, began to ask for forgiveness, realizing that his actions had led to serious consequences and caused discontent among those around him. Shouting his apologies, the nobleman rushed in panic into the crowd of knights, quickly leaving the stranger's house, realizing that such actions led to consequences, and now he had to pay for his insolence, which of course was deserved. Altair explained that a man who could not defend himself was doomed to defeat, emphasizing the importance of strength and confidence in any circumstances, especially when it came to honor and dignity. Nadia herself took this personally because, as the owner's wife, she considered it her duty to protect her home, realizing that the safety and well-being of the entire large family depended on her. She couldn't even push the other man's hand away as they grabbed her, feeling fear sweep through her fragile body, and realizing that she was in a vulnerable position, unable to defend herself. Altair froze surprised when he heard an apology from his innocent wife, not expecting her to take such responsibility for what happened and feel guilty. However, instead of reproaching the lord, affectionately grabbed his wife's hand, on which a bruise was visible, and said that it should be carefully treated, expressing care and tenderness for her at this difficult moment. The maiden tried to convince him that it was just nonsense and that it was not worth attaching such importance to it. But the lord remained adamant, insisting that caring for the lady's health was a top priority, and he would not allow her to ignore her injuries. The man's face looked strange, and it was obvious that he urgently needed help because his expression betrayed great concern and pain, causing a desire to intervene and offer support. Nadia looked in horror at the wound Altair had received during the fight, and the woman's heart sank with anxiety when she realized how dangerous such a fight had been and how much he had risked to protect their family. She screamed in panic that they urgently needed to call a doctor, realizing that her brave husband's health was at risk, and delay could have serious consequences. Covering her mouth with her hands, the girl could not calmly look at the blood that flowed due to the injury, experiencing strong memories of the past, when such scenes were unbearable for her. The girl's body began to shake from growing horror and anxiety, and she could hardly cope with the emotions that rolled in waves, making her feel helpless in this critical situation. Concerned, the lord approached the lady and asked what had happened to her and why she was shaking so much, feeling anxious for the woman's condition and wanting to understand how he could help her in this difficult moment. Realizing that arguing with his wife was useless, the man decided to accept her concern and agreed to treatment, realizing that her concern came from love and a desire to protect his health. Nadia nodded, holding her husband's things tightly in her hands, trying not to fall from the excitement and fear that were growing inside her. But at the same time, she was determined to support the guy in this difficult moment, realizing how important support was for his recovery. Beneath the Lord's clothing were many wounds, bruises, and scars, each telling its own story of the struggle and courage he had shown in battles for his family and land. Nadia stood next to the doctor, who was carefully examining the nobleman's wounds. During the examination, he came to the conclusion that the Lord had several serious wounds that required immediate treatment and attention. Concerned, the lady anxiously asked the doctor if the boy was in much pain. Her voice trembled with excitement because she understood that suffering could be serious and affect not only the physical, but also the emotional state. As a child, her mother often took the aristocrat's hand when she was sick, and this simple touch always brought her relief, giving her a feeling of care and warmth that was so necessary in difficult moments. The Lord answered briefly and reservedly that he was in pain, and this confused everyone present, causing them to freeze in surprise and anxiety because his revelation destroyed the atmosphere of tense anticipation. After this, a man's hand was extended, as if offering help and support, bringing a note of hope and care into the tense atmosphere which is so necessary in this difficult moment. Nadia, tightly squeezing the man's palm, tried with all her heart to ease the unpleasant pain, wanting to convey to him the warmth and support that could help in this difficult moment. The girl, sitting quietly next to the wounded lord, tried her best to help him, hoping that sincere desire and warm support could at least slightly ease the suffering in this difficult and anxious hour when life and hope merge into one. Beauty quickly realized that their situation was very different from the moments when her mother took her hand, because now they were a couple in love, full of hope and desire for a future together, which gave the relationship a special depth. The doctor froze in place, unable to continue the treatment, due to the sudden embarrassment that came over him when he realized how close the couple was and how it interfered with his professional approach to work. Having reluctantly finished treating the wounds, he quickly grabbed his suitcase and, full of determination, hurried to the exit, trying to forget about the disturbing thoughts that prevented him from concentrating on work. Taking the paper in her hands, Nadia began to carefully read the recommendations on what her husband should do to quickly recover, hoping that every word would help her better understand how to support him during this difficult period. Thus began a new chapter in the life of the noblewoman, who, finding herself in her husband's castle, immersed herself in caring for him, trying to do everything possible for his comfort and speedy recovery, finding meaning and joy in this. She often sat by his bed, ready to fulfill any request each day, feeling more and more how deep her pure care and affection for him was filling the atmosphere with hope and warmth. She clasped her hands together again and prayed that her husband would never develop any more scars, hoping that her sincere prayers and concern would help him heal and avoid further suffering. Suddenly, a trusted advisor entered the room confidently, asking the Lord to look at the new documents, which could certainly have a significant impact on their future affairs, as well as on the fate of the entire family. Altair gently stroked the girl's head, trying to calm her down, and with a soft but confident tone, ordered her to be quieter, because silence was necessary to protect them from unnecessary worries and to focus on the important moment. The subordinate could not help but notice that the aristocrat looked tired, and this was obvious from the constant care of her husband, who was lying in bed, suffering and in need of attention and support. Normally, Altair would have already been on the battlefield, oblivious to his wounds and the sacrifices he made for the cause. But this time he remained nearby, immersed in caring for his wife and well-being. The sleeping lady was currently not letting the guy get out of bed, as if instinctively sensing that he needed to rest and regain his strength in order to cope with the upcoming trials. Confused, the man tried to find an excuse, claiming that it was the fight with the dragon that got him into this difficult situation, and not his wife, trying to deflect blame from himself and justify his behavior. The butler handed the gentleman a letter from the count in which he expressed dissatisfaction with the refusal to give up his shares in the gold mines, to the Lord emphasizing the importance of this issue for their future relations and financial well-being. Altair read the papers, he thought with indignation, that paying an aristocrat for his justly convicted conviction was complete nonsense, since he believed that he should remain true to his principles and not succumb to manipulation. Quietly, the subordinate explained to the master that despite his personal feelings, the count was famous and respected in high society circles, and therefore had to be taken into account since his influence could have an impact on their affairs. This came as a complete surprise to the Lord, as previously he had nothing to lose, and acted recklessly believing that the decisions would not affect the future. But now the circumstances had changed, and he had to think about the consequences. Once a ruthless knight who surpassed those who were supposed to protect him, he grew more confident in his own strength, with each passing day forgetting the code of honor and loyalty that were once dear to him. Altair gently touched the pink hair, realizing that he now had something to lose, and this sense of responsibility made him value every moment spent with those the man loved. Previously, the handsome man thought that their marriage would be purely formal, nothing more, but over time, feelings changed, and he began to realize how deeply this connection connects him, discovering new facets of love and devotion. But this woman was able to conquer him with her kind smile and innocence, forcing him to see in her not only a wife, but also a reliable partner with whom the Lord would like to share all the joys and difficulties of life. Sitting in bed and playing with his beloved's hair, the man still did not know how to behave correctly, with her struggling with internal doubts and fears. Feelings may not be strong enough to build a real future together. The Lord had managed to forget about the butler's presence, and holding back his emotions, briefly replied that he already had a plan to take revenge on the arrogant count, intending to use his cunning and resources to regain his lost position and respect. Paul was puzzled as to how one could take revenge on such a rich man with so many resources and connections, and he could not understand what steps should be taken to strike a blow that could damage his reputation and influence. The lady still had bright bruises on her skin from the strong grip, a reminder of the recent tense moment that left not only physical, but also emotional marks, making her feel vulnerable. The aristocrat growled that it was time to show who was really in charge among the nobles, filling his words with confident authority and determination, preparing to establish his own rules in this world of intrigue and manipulation. Nadia sat in her office and persistently asked her butler about what they had learned about the mines in the mountains, trying to gather as much information as possible that could help in making important decisions and strengthening their position. Realizing the importance of the issue, she asked if the problem was money for developing the mine, hoping to get a clear answer that would help determine the next steps in this matter. The man agreed that it was indeed a matter of financial problems, and they were considering taking out a loan from the empire, hoping that this would allow them to develop the mine and solve all the current difficulties. The lady put the key on the table, and with a slight sigh, said that the bank had too high interest rates, which meant they couldn't afford to take out a loan, and that made it difficult for the mine to develop. After this, the noblewoman decided to invest her own money in this project, realizing that only in this way would they be able to overcome financial difficulties and provide equipment for the mine, hoping for a successful future. Paul was deeply concerned about the aristocrat's decision, saying that it was a mistake to think that the lady needed to invest her own money, as this could put her in a vulnerable position and have serious consequences for herself. This came as a complete surprise to the noblewoman. She had assumed that Paul would be glad to see additional finances that could help in the implementation of their plans, and did not expect that he would oppose such a decision. The butler reacted with surprise when the lady suggested another option in which she would invest money in their project, realizing that such a move could change everything and lead to unexpected consequences for all involved. With shining eyes, the lady stated that this would be a kind of investment, emphasizing that she believed in the potential of the project and hoped for its success, which could bring not only financial benefits, but also improve their position in society. Night fell, and the dark sky enveloped the palace, plunging it into a mysterious silence, where only the occasional sounds of rustling and distant night singing could be heard, creating an atmosphere of mystery and anticipation. The noblewoman lying in bed suddenly woke up, feeling the slight chill of the night and the silence around her, which reminded her of the mysterious events that were taking place outside the secluded space. Jumping up from her seat, she suddenly realized that the evening had already arrived, and the day full of events and emotions had quietly ended, leaving behind only shadows of memories and unspoken words that continued to swirl in her thoughts, causing a slight excitement. The last thing the aristocrat remembered was a conversation with the butler in which they discussed important issues concerning their current affairs and future plans, which left a deep imprint on her mind and made her think about what lay ahead. Suddenly, the door slammed loudly, and the handle turned, causing excitement and curiosity in the aristocrat, who instantly became alert, ready for any turn of events, waiting to see who exactly would enter the room. Altair entered his wife's room without asking permission, his confident steps filled with determination, and he seemed to be oblivious to the boundaries between them, ready to discuss everything that was bothering his wife. He stated categorically that the lady had finally woken up, although in fact it would not have been at all superfluous for her to lie in bed a little longer, enjoying sweet dreams. The man is rapidly recovering, thanks to unique medications that, like a magic potion, help him significantly speed up the healing process and restore lost strength, allowing him to feel full of energy again. Afterwards, Altair gave his companion a special ointment so that she could heal the bruises and ease the pain, giving her a feeling of care and support. The medicine was kept in a small box, elegantly decorated with blue and gold patterns, which gave it a sophisticated look and inspired hope for healing, as if protecting the contents from any adversity. Suddenly, Nadia, inspired by an unexpected thought, decided that she could help not only herself, but also the Lord himself by applying the ointment to him. She enthusiastically approached him, determined to ease his suffering and facilitate his healing. As a result, the man sat on the bed with his torso naked, and the lady was nearby, creating an atmosphere of closeness and trust between them, filled with slight excitement and understanding. The little girl carefully spread the cream over the scars and wounds, which gradually healed, as if new possibilities for healing were blossoming under her gentle hands, giving the skin a healthy appearance and restoring its lost radiance. The Lord was embarrassed by the unexpected closeness, putting his hand to his forehead and taking a deep breath, as if realizing that this moment was enough to feel an invisible connection and trust between them. The ointment had to be carefully applied to the noblewoman's hand so that the bruises would gradually disappear, returning her skin to its former smoothness and beauty, as if washing away traces of unpleasant experiences and restoring self-confidence. Altair kindly agreed to apply the medicine to his beloved's hands, despite the embarrassment that overwhelmed him at that moment, because he understood how important it was to support her and help her in healing. Suddenly, the aristocrat approached her, and Nadia felt a strange excitement from such closeness to her husband. Her heart began to beat faster, as if every moment it became more intense, filling the atmosphere with sensuality and tenderness. Their faces were close, almost touching, which created an atmosphere of deep intimacy and trust, filling the space around with invisible energy that could ignite a spark between them and reveal all hidden feelings. Shocked, Nadia recoiled when she learned that the gentleman had expected her to be treated kindly, hoping that she would call him something different than before, which awakened in her feelings of embarrassment and unexpected closeness. Back then, she had actually made a promise to figure out how they should address each other, and now that memory came flooding back into her mind, reminding her of the tenderness and closeness they had once shared. Frustrated, the maiden admitted that she could not think of anything suitable, which further increased her embarrassment and made her think about how to express her feelings to the gentleman. The man gave the lady a hint that perhaps she should think about her parents, to find the answer to the question of how they should address each other, because it was their memories that could help her choose the right words. Vivid images of her deceased parents appeared in her head, always addressing each other with affection and playfulness, filling the atmosphere around them with warmth and love. The maiden stood hesitantly, not knowing whether the Lord would like such sweet and cloying addresses, and her heart was filled with excitement at the thought of how he would perceive these tender and cloying words. Altair hastened to assure the bride that such behavior and tender addresses were completely normal for married people, emphasizing that the sincerity and warmth in their words could be considered a natural part of their relationship. The man's eyes widened in surprise when he heard his wife call him cupcake, and a surprised expression appeared on his face, mixed with joy and slight embarrassment at such a sweet and playful endearment. He couldn't utter a word when he heard Nadia calling him pudding and other sweet names. His thoughts were confused in a stream of emotions, filling his heart with tenderness and embarrassment from such an unexpected caress. With flushed cheeks, she asked shyly if the Lord liked any of the cute names, feeling excitement creeping up on her, and hoping that the playful words would make him smile and feel pleasant emotions. When asked whether her parents really addressed each other with such tender words, she confidently confirmed this, recalling how their affectionate nicknames always filled the house with warmth and an atmosphere of love. Covering his mouth with his hand, the man explained that his mother and father always called each other by their first names, and this created an atmosphere of closeness and respect in their relationship, which left him with pleasant memories of family life. In the end, the Lord said that they should also call each other by their first names, because it would be much better than calling the spouse Cupcake, and added that sincerity in address is always more appreciated. The lady agreed, and they decided to try to move to a more informal communication, filling the atmosphere with lightness and friendliness, which helped them to reveal their feelings and establish a closer connection. Squinting in embarrassment, the beauty decided to call the gentleman by name, feeling her heart beat faster from excitement. This decision filled the moment with special meaning and tenderness, allowing her to experience new vivid emotions in their communication. The guy didn't like being called sir, but he knew it was progress. After that, he asked if he could also call his wife by her first name, wanting to create a more intimate and trusting atmosphere in their relationship. Nadia agreed with a smile, her eyes shining with joy, and she felt the atmosphere between them fill with warmth and lightness, creating new opportunities for intimacy. Looking down, the man muttered the name of his beloved. The man's voice sounded quiet and gentle, as if every word he spoke was filled with deep emotion and tenderness that he felt for her. Suddenly, the charming, handsome man hugged the lady, pressing her tightly to himself, as if wanting to protect her from the whole world, and taking her hand, gently pushed her towards the bed, where new, exciting adventures awaited them. Their faces slowly approached each other, and finally, tenderly touching their noses, they seemed to have found in this moment that amazing closeness that united their souls and made their hearts beat in unison. The man warmly promised that he would not make any vulgar proposals, but would only invite her to sit comfortably next to him, to lie quietly together, and enjoy a peaceful moment after a hard day. Nadia couldn't help but notice that her husband was very tired and looked exhausted, as if a difficult day had left traces of fatigue on his face, and in his eyes one could see the need for peace and care, which he had been waiting for so long. So they spent the evening in the room together, enjoying the atmosphere of comfort and tranquility, sharing warm words, and letting time flow slowly, as if the world around them had stopped. After some time, large-scale works began in the mountain range, which attracted the attention of local residents, filling the air with anticipation and excitement, creating an atmosphere of change that everyone had long dreamed of. Word of the new mine spread quickly, and people from all over the world began to flock to the place, full of curiosity and hope for the riches that might be hidden in the bowels of the earth, promising them a new start and opportunity. The palace was desperately short of hands, as there were only a butler Anna and a cook there who were unable to cope with the numerous affairs and concerns, creating an aura of tension and discontent among everyone present. The lady put her hand to her chin thoughtfully, thinking that more hands should be hired first of all to ease the daily tasks and improve the general condition of the palace, which needed help. Thanks to the magic crystals, they will have the opportunity to earn significant funds, which will open doors to new prospects and ensure prosperity for both them and the entire kingdom. It was also claimed that their purity exceeded the quality of ordinary gemstones, which in turn significantly increased their value on the market, making these crystals especially desirable to collectors and magicians. The maiden walked slowly through the green grass, realizing that she needed to work much harder to achieve her goals and realize her plans. Altair, sitting in his cozy office, plunged into a thorough search for buyers for the magical stones, thinking about how to emphasize their properties in order to attract interest and arouse a desire to invest in these rare gifts of nature. The lady in charge of staffing the castle, which shone magnificently under the cover of night, knew that she needed to attract the best specialists to ensure comfort and order in this magical place. A stack of documents fell onto the table, representing a multitude of resumes, each containing the stories and ambitions of people who wanted to be part of the castle's life and contribute to its prosperity. Looking at the butler, who was sitting opposite the lady, noticed with a slight smile that there were quite a lot of candidates for the role of servants, and this gave hope that among them there would be real treasures for their castle. Paul added with a smile that some of these candidates did indeed have impressive experience and amazing skills, which could greatly improve the work in the castle, which was quite sufficient. Looking down to take a closer look at one lady's resume, Nadia was surprised to recognize the familiar name Mary, which brought back a wave of memories and interest in hers. Mary was a maid with short black hair, attentive and responsible, which made her an excellent candidate for work in the castle, where not only professionalism was required, but also a desire to care for others. She was always there for the young lady throughout her childhood, helping and supporting her, creating a strong friendship that remained an important part of their lives for many years. The maid, deciding to risk everything for the sake of her mistress, agreed to escape from the cruel marquis. But when the aristocrat learned of this bold decision, his anger knew no bounds, and he severely punished both, not forgetting to reproach the maid for her insolence. Paul, who was standing nearby, realized that Mary's resume would have to be put aside since she was an acquaintance of Vine, and therefore automatically received the position of a maid despite all her merits and impressive experience. With a smile on her face, Nadia remembered the maid who was the only one who showed her kindness and care after the tragic death of her parents, supporting her in difficult times and becoming a reliable friend. Suddenly, the door opened slightly, and a curious voice sounded in the air, asking the lady what exactly was the reason for her joy, because at that moment she seemed so happy as if something truly amazing and unexpected had happened in her life. It was Altair who, with a slight expression of curiosity on his face, asked if the aristocrat was looking for him, since they had often crossed paths lately, and he was interested to know what was bothering or pleasing the lady so much. The innocent maiden began to stutter at the mention of the nobleman, her husband, as if she was overcome by mixed feelings, anxiety and excitement, which she tried to hide behind an awkward smile. Confused, the lady shook her head nervously, obviously trying to hide her reaction, because she always reacted so strangely and unusually, only to him, as if his presence evoked feelings in her that she herself could not fully understand or explain. Paul realized that he should tactfully leave the nobles alone, feeling that his presence at this moment was unnecessary, and they needed privacy to continue their important conversation. It turned out that the maiden had called the man to discuss an important invitation from an Eastern family which could play a significant role in their future relationship and the fate of the family. The Lord believed that she did not need his permission since managing family affairs, and responding to invitations was the exclusive privilege of the lady, and he respected the right to make such decisions independently. The happy aristocrat asked with excitement in her voice if her husband had managed to conclude the long-awaited deal with the supreme power which could change their position and strengthen the family's influence. With a grin on his face, the man said that they had managed to make a deal with the Silver Fox to sell the magic stones, and they had offered a very generous amount of money that would significantly strengthen their financial position and open up new opportunities. Silver Fox owned a large tract of land, giving her considerable power and influence, and her status was on par with Black Panther, giving the impression that both figures held important positions in society. It could be said that all the territories on the map were divided between these two factions, each of which defended its interests and sought to strengthen its position, creating a tense atmosphere of rivalry and struggle for power. However, in light of the upcoming events, the fox seemed to be striving to take first place, wanting to surpass even the panther herself, which foreshadowed new twists in their confrontation and struggle for influence.